due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are providing public access via Zoom, and the public has been provided instructions on assessing the meeting. There will be a mechanism by raising your hand for the public to alert the body that they would like to speak. And a couple other things, all votes will be by roll call. And before you speak, could you state your name and your locatable address? And having said all of that, I am opening the select board meeting from May 27th at 6:32 p.m. And there will be, after our approval of agenda, the time for the public to speak publicly. So I'm going to ask you hold off. Roger has said he can see your raised hands, but for the board, I'm looking for approval of the agenda or add, delete, move. And I also need to state that all members of the select board are present. That's Mary Layton, Roger Arnold, John Langus, Rob Gear, also our town manager, Herb Durfee. I saw Miranda, who is the manager's assistant. I don't see her now, though. Oh, there she is. There you are, Miranda. Sorry. And members of the public. So back to the board, approval of the agenda. Any board members? Yes, John, and then Mary.
So there was correspondence about the agenda amongst the select board regarding item 5, the select board appointments and the lister appointment. That nevertheless remained on the agenda here. I'd like to have that the lister item taken off of the agenda because I don't think that that was approved. In fact, I think that that was disapproved by 3 members as an agenda item.
There was, so yes, I did not see prior to her posting the agenda that was added back. I thought I had seen that it was not added. There was also my mistake in that I could have sworn, I would have bet my paycheck that position had been listed publicly in the help wanted ad. And as a result of Herb and Miranda's work, that was not publicly on a help wanted ad. So we're gonna roll call the board unless Mary wants to speak first on whether or not to include this agenda or defer it.
I say go ahead with the roll call.
Okay, so there was a move to remove the lister appointment from tonight's meeting, and hopefully we will get it on the June 10th meeting. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote in favor of moving the lister appointment to the June meeting.
Roger?
I vote to remove from this agenda.
John?
Yes, I vote to remove from this agenda.
Rob?
I would vote to defer it to a later meeting, yes.
I'm going to abstain. So my apologies to Doug and Cheryl. This will be duly posted on the next Help Wanted ad.
Claudette, there was no second to that motion.
Oh, sorry.
I can second it.
So now we'll, motion made by Claudette, seconded by Roger. We need to roll call again. Mary,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
and I abstain, and thank you, Herb, for pointing that out.
So Claudette, I think the second point that you said, I think will remain under discussion during the setting of the next agenda, right? We did
Yep.
not just decide to put that on a future agenda.
Okay. Although we do know that it is an open position that can be appointed up to the next election, which is August 11th.
True, we are empowered to make that appointment. We chose not to affirmatively at an earlier meeting, so I think that will require a discussion, is what I'm suggesting. But I'm not suggesting that this would be the time for that.
Right. And I believe I saw Cheryl's hand up.
So I'm going to unmute you. There you go, Cheryl. And it's star. You can go to participants and you can raise your hand that way, Cheryl, if possible.
Say that again, Roger.
When you click onto the participants in Zoom, and there's an option to raise your hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
Name and locatable address, please.
Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. I did recall at the time we received the resignation from Chris Clement, a discussion at your meeting to include the Lister open position in any future posting for open positions. So I'm disappointed that that didn't happen. And I do know that Bonnie has it out there with this special meeting. So it isn't as though the public isn't aware of the open spot, but we can talk about it some more later, I guess.
We will. So, anything else on the agenda from the board? Then moving on to public and select board comments. And I'll leave it to Roger to, sorry,
I'm
Mary.
sorry. Do we need to approve the agenda? I mean, that was something we pulled out of it, but did we actually also approve the rest of it?
The consent agenda, you mean?
Yeah.
No, the regular agenda. We don't.
I think by implication, but we could certainly go through and do it formally if you'd like.
We typically don't.
I don't think we typically vote. I think we typically just approve it unless someone wants something taken out or added.
Right, and we moved, there was a motion and a second and a 4-to-1 vote to remove the Lister position. So otherwise, if everyone's fine with the agenda, I don't believe we need to vote on the rest of the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Now moving on to public comments.
Okay, Linda Cook was first, followed by Christina Hall, followed by someone who's 926. So I'm going to unmute Linda Cook first, if that's okay, Claudette.
Yep, okay, Linda, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I have two things. First of all, who
Name
else?
and locatable address, please.
Sorry, you're right. Linda Cook, 147 River Road. Who is at the meeting? Who do you have for people that have joined the meeting?
We have,
So I might.
There are 23 participants. Is that enough info?
Uh-huh. Well, I was hoping so I could recognize voices. It doesn't matter, but I'm just on phone.
Yeah,
yep, well, they will be introducing themselves prior to speaking.
Okay. Thank you. The second comment is a discussion reference to the Norwich Community Car Parade to celebrate the Hanover High School class of 2020 graduates. Are we able to discuss that?
That's in the public comment section, and I believe there's quite a few people here to speak to that.
Good, because I think it's a very creative way of the entire organizational pattern that's happened with the parents, with the students, with the school, with Norwich, with Hanover, police department, and many more that I'm not aware of. But I think it's a great celebration for these seniors, which everyone should be very proud of their children and our community students who are celebrating a wonderful time in their life.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Roger, who was next? You're muted.
Go ahead, Christina. I unmuted you, sorry, but I muted
Thank you.
myself.
Good evening. I'm Christina Hall, and I live at 728 New Boston Road here in Norwich. And I want to thank you for opening us up for public comment. I would like to speak towards the community parade. A bunch of us had gotten together, and with the support of the police chief, we were trying to organize a motor parade for the Hanover High School grads to include Norwich and Hanover and all the surrounding schools that actually attend the high school. As you know, everything basically has been taken out from under them as far as their senior activities, you know, their picnic, their class day, their graduation, their class trip, their all-night party, you name it. It just goes on and on. So that's what our hope was, that we could get the select board also to support this. We've reached out to a lot of community members, and so far we haven't had anybody who basically has been opposed to it, but has been very supportive of it. And we have, after, if everything goes fine, we have task teams, you know, ready to go to make this a safe event. Chief Frank has she's been great. You know, she's mapped out a route for us. She's, you know, told us, you know, which intersections should be, have people for traffic control, how to make sure it's there, we have the distancing between any spectators, how to make it safe for the kids in the actual car parade themselves, you know, parents driving or an adult that's not graduating driving, so that the kids actually can, you know, be seen and wave, and just so that the whole community can really support them. And because usually, you know, a lot of people go to graduation and congratulate the kids, but that won't be happening this year. So we're just looking for the select board to show some support and join a team to help this, to make this a nice, safe, and positive experience for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And
The next person was, I tried to get their name, but their phone number ending in 3926. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Roger, this is Larry Wiggins. This is Larry Wiggins, Public Works Director.
Okay, sorry. Did you have your hand?
I'm sorry. On my video, it's my name. It's not my phone number. So I didn't realize you were asking to recognize, for me to respond to recognize the 926.
Okay, that's totally cool. You had your hand up. Did you want to speak in public comment?
No, I was responding into your request about who's 926, and I was
all right. Sorry, you're good though. And then Alice Garner is next, Claudette.
go ahead, Alice. You're muted.
I had muted you.
And I live at 106 Beaver Meadow Road. And I am in complete support of this. I think it's a great idea. And I would do whatever it took to make it happen.
Thank you, Alice. Is there anyone else wanting to make a public comment?
Cheryl raised her hand.
Is that Cheryl Lindbergh?
Yes.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road again. Just wondering if tonight there will be an answer to this question sometime during the meeting. If everything ends with the governor's current date of June 15th, will the Tracy Hall building be back open again after that date?
I would guess it's going to depend on what parameters the governor sets as far as access and crowds and all of that other stuff.
So I think that towns are able to determine their use of their buildings, right? It's the town by town decision.
Yeah, and Herb's been in charge. I mean, that's his part of his role. So,
Right. That's why I'm asking the question as to whether or not an end on June 15th by the governor would automatically make the buildings available again, or is that a town by town decision that continues?
turfing it to you, Herb.
I have no intention of outguessing the governor at this point because we're not near June 15 from that standpoint. So Tracy Hall will remain shut until at least then. When it becomes time to more open up Tracy Hall, I will be doing it not just to unlock it and open it up. It will be still probably trying to set up appointments and everything. The public will not be allowed to just walk in and out at their leisure. They will have to have probably an appointment. They will have to have specific business in the building. It will not be, there will be kind of a new norm where I'm not going to be making general copies for folks. You have to come in for a specific purpose. For the interim period, in terms of when that door can be unlocked, I've had a doorbell installed on the Main Street side so that for deliveries and stuff, so they don't just get necessarily left outside. But when we do have that softer opening, that if appointments and stuff are made, we'll have the ability to allow the public in the building, but in a controlled sense. So I'm not going to make any guesses until I get closer to that June 15th timeframe. And the overall situation is I'm trying to protect the employees and the general public at the same timeframe.
Hey, Claudia.
Oh, sorry.
You have to raise your hand, John. Sorry.
I know. It's not. I understand, but it's not showing. So call me when you can. My hand is up.
Okay.
I'm. Thank you.
Anyone else, Roger?
Yes, we have a couple folks. So we have Sean next, and then Marianne, and then John Pepper. So Sean, I'm going to unmute you, and can you speak? It looks like there's two of you there.
Hi, I'm Andrea Nolan. I'm at 24 Simpson Road. And I just wanted to speak to the safety precautions of the parade and let everybody know that with the help of Officer Frank, it's going to be very socially distant. There's going to be marks for every 10 feet with chalk so that people know where to stand. It will be required or it'll be recommended that people wear masks, and for students that they're going to be in small gatherings, no more than 4 or 5 students on a float. And the cars will be driven by an adult that is a non-graduating senior, preferably a parent. So we're trying to take every precaution we can and make sure that safety is first and that people will be able to watch the seniors go by in a very safe way. We don't need Tracy Hall. I don't know if that comment was related to the parade or not, but.
I don't believe it was.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Marianne, you're on your iPhone. I'm going to unmute you, and then you can go ahead.
Great, thank you. My name is Marianne Barthel. I live at 137 Union Village Road, and I'm also speaking on behalf of the seniors. I have a senior as well, and have been working with the community members to try and make this parade happen so we can have some sort of celebration for our seniors. The plan is for it to take place on Friday, June 12th. Starting the students would line up around 4, they would leave at 4:30 and be done in time to go back to their homes to watch the video recording that the school is making for their graduation. so that there wouldn't be any kind of loitering or any problems with anyone hanging out beyond the end of the parade. So my last comment / question is, what do we need to know from here as far as getting the green light? Do we need a green light from the select board or not?
I don't know the answer to that. Herb, do you?
I think in general, the idea was that they wanted to present the concept to the select board to make sure there weren't any big issues coming forward. Generally speaking, these are the kind of things that I sign off on. I have no problem with it, as I've indicated to Christina before, subject to sign off by, for instance, Chief Frank for public safety issues. And if there's anything with regard to Larry and Department of Public Works in terms, like road closures and all that. But typically Chief Frank is really good about serving his point on that. And that's why you hear Christina talking good things about the chief.
Okay. And John Pepper, you had a comment?
Yes. Hey guys. Yeah, it doesn't sound like
Name
much
and
more.
locatable address.
John Pepper, 95 Elm. How is everybody? Yeah, it doesn't sound like there's any more support needed. In fact, I'm starting to worry any more support will go backwards. But I just want to make sure that I weighed in on how positive I think the parade will be for Norwich and for the community. And that was it. I just wanted to make sure claim my seat. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
I have a question. What's the route of the parade? If someone can answer.
This is Mary Ann again at 137 Union Village Road. The planned route is to meet up at Huntley Meadow and then come through town and end at the Dresden Fields. If Hanover chooses to participate, Chief Frank is planning on working with them on any additional parts to the route that go into Hanover.
Awesome.
I saw some hands go up and then go down, so I assume that the question was answered. Yeah.
My name's Andrea Nolan, 24 Simpson Road. That there is some flexibility because we are trying to collaborate with Hanover. We were waiting for some support from the Hanover School District, and it seems that we are getting progress is being made. So right now the route is a little bit up in the air. The timing is a little bit up in the air, but the general plan as it is right now is June 12th from 4:30 to 6-ish. And the idea was that everybody would disperse right after to go watch the graduation in their homes privately.
Okay. Any other public comments?
No.
Any board comments on this proposal? Yes, Mary.
Just think it's really great. I'm glad that it's happening. The kids will never forget this time in their lives for a lot of reasons, but I think it'll be a great send-off for them.
John Langus.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, anything that we can find to be a positive part of these memories, I think we should embrace. And it's great that everyone's sort of taken the lead here and come up with this idea. So full support.
So, of course, I think this is amazing, and it's like more than just students who are celebrating this milestone. But as someone who did not go to their high school graduation, I wonder if, because I opted out, I wonder, are students in support of this? Or are we supporting students, or are we supporting them in the ways we want to support them? Or do they want a parade? That could be rhetorical. I assume the answer is, of course, and if not, it's a milestone that is always forced upon them. So even if they don't love it, right? Right? There's some hands that went up. Oh, okay, cool. So I guess the question that people want to answer is like, how have you involved students in the preparations for this? And are they excited about it or not? Christina Hall, you were first. If I may say that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we have basically been trying to keep it a little bit low key for the students because originally the school was not supportive of anything live at all. And there were some parents that were actually trying to do something in Hanover, and it was basically shot down. Now there's, as of 5 o'clock today, the school is now on board with the motor parade. We just didn't want to get the students' hopes up again and have something else taken away. So, but we have heard from the kids that they want to do something live. They want to be able to see their friends and wave to their friends and do something together. And this is something that they can do together that's safe. So yeah,
Awesome.
they're gonna have fun.
Cool. Great. Thank you for answering that. And
Who
then
else?
the Marianne, and then also Sean, but not Sean, the Sean who's the Zoom account. So Marianne, you were, I think, next.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, we were trying to keep it somewhat low key, but I definitely shared it with my senior, and she was very excited, and also was like, can we wear our caps and gowns? Because they really haven't even had the opportunity to do that except for about, I don't know, 90 seconds and by themselves. And so again, I just want to reiterate the point that they are just really thirsting for something special. And while this might not be everyone's cup of tea, nothing ever is, as you well know by not going to your own graduation. And also that they are not required to do this either. So it's just something nice from the community.
That's awesome. Okay, great. And then Sean, not Sean, you're next.
Hi, I'm not Sean.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
That's a good thing.
So, as everybody said, we were trying to keep it somewhat quiet. We did ask some of our own kids, and there's a lot of support. But the message that we want to send them is that even in a pandemic, even in a difficult time, the community supports them, and that good things can happen even in difficult moments. So that's really the message. We're going to include everybody from the district and even from the sending towns. So if they want to come, it's here for them. That's the goal.
That's awesome. Great. I'm glad I asked that. So thank you, everyone.
So it certainly appears that you have the full support of the select board with this project. And I would just kind of love to see Ledyard Bridge closed off for a parade. So hopefully that can happen. So I believe you all have Chief Frank in your corner, and you and she are, and her department are arranging everything. And you are also in support, so go for it.
Great.
And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comments?
Linda Cook has raised her hand again. That's it.
Yes, Linda.
Hi, Linda.
All right, great job. The only thing I'd like to put out there, and you'd have to give us a name and a number for any volunteers who would like to help encourage and participate in this project. Is there a name and telephone number that we can have given to us?
Sure.
Leaving it up to one of the parents or teachers, parents/teachers.
Sure. Did anyone raise their hand yet?
Go ahead, Marianne.
Marianne Barthel, 137 Union Village Road. Yeah, I'm happy. It's probably, I can give you my cell phone or an email, whatever works best. My cell phone is 802-291-0228. And they can leave a message. Preferably, I'd rather have folks email me, and that's Marianne, MARIANNE .Barthel, B as in boy, ARTHEL at Gmail. Actually, I'd probably rather have my email instead of publicizing my cell phone to the entire world.
And I also think, wasn't it posted on the listserv, some contact information for people who want to volunteer?
That was me.
And was that yesterday's?
I think it was, what day is today? It's Wednesday. It was Monday.
Okay, great.
I think, or I can't remember.
Okay.
It was day.
And there's also people posting contact info on the chat, which you can't see. But if you need, Linda, if you need help getting in touch with somebody, let me know. Okay, if there are no more public comments, we're going to move on to item 3, which is our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
So a motion made by John, seconded by Rob to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion from the board? No? I have one question, Herb. There was a payment of, I think it was almost $1,900 to Mount Scottney Memorials. Do you know off the top of your head what that was about? And it was under capital improvement.
I'll have to look on that, but it's a grant that we received that is being headed up by Tracy Hayes, being overseen by Bree. I just got to go look. It was in the monthly reports.
Yeah, yes, it wasn't on. No, it was in the accounts payable.
Or sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah.
If it's part of Tracy's grant, though, that's
yeah.
You said it was filed under capital improvements, though, Claudia? I didn't know.
Thought
so. That's my question, is if it hit the right. If you caught that, I'm got to make sure that's in the right area.
I don't have my accounts payable stuff up, but
I just want to see what the name of it was, because it's not under Mount or Scottney.
it was under Mount Scottney in the alphabetical list.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look that one up, but it is, if it's Mount Scottney, it's related to that grant.
Okay.
I'm going for the rest of the meeting, let me go through it and figure it out, and I can, if I find it, I'll answer it under town manager report.
Yeah, it says corner markers, Herb, just so you know.
Markers. Okay.
Yeah, but that's okay. So we have a motion on the table that's been seconded. Any further comment? If not, roll call. Mary?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob? Rob, you're muted.
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So that's a 5-0 on that. Next up is the Woody Adams tract proposal. There were public hearings made. The minutes of those hearings were in the packet. There was a presentation at our last meeting. So unless board members have a specific question for Craig, who I see is in the audience, there's someone willing to start off on our motion.
I'll do it.
Mary.
I move to authorize the expenditure of up to $130,000 from the Conservation Designated Fund for the purposes of providing matching funds for a VHCB grant to purchase a 186-acre forest parcel referred to as the Woody Adams parcel.
Is there a second?
A second.
So motion made by Mary, seconded by John. Any discussion? Yes, John.
So there was some back and forth in setting this agenda item of a question of open meeting law stuff related to these meetings. Am I remembering that right? Is that this?
You are. And it was the 3 public hearings prior to the select board public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But those minutes were obtained, I believe, from the Zoom recording of those meetings. And so the minutes of those meetings are included in the packet.
Okay. So I think that part of our motion may need to be to cure that and to invite any comment of anyone that feels aggrieved by the lateness of those minutes. And then in agreeing to support this, to cure that. Does that sound right, Herb?
If you believe that you need to cure the situation of having late minutes, yes, you could acknowledge those, but curing that really belongs with the Conservation Commission. Craig crafted the draft minutes in order to make sure that we could move forward with the agenda item tonight. I think their original thought was that that the recording itself would serve as the minutes. While I agree with you, I can't find anything in statute that says that it can't. I always lean for folks to have a hard copy record, because if we change technologies or something in the future, you know, for instance, if we did a thing on cassette 8 track tapes in the back, you know, how would we be able to deal with the minutes in the future? So, and then keeping them on file in the town clerk's vault is important as part of the process. So if you want to move forward, just the Conservation Commission at some point, their cure would be to approve the minutes, and then that would be the cure. But for tonight,
all right, I'm fine with not adding stuff to this then, if that's something that they can take. I guess there's actually a sort of fundamental question of whether they're a group that was subject to open meeting law, because they're not an appointed group or anything, right? Aren't they just sort of an ad hoc?
Yeah, no, they're statutorily enabled. These are right out of the Conservation Commission and the statute. So
oh, sorry, I thought this was some special committee, not the Conservation Commission itself.
No, so this
Okay.
public hearing of that group, yep. So
Okay.
they do need to approve their minutes, but you do have draft minutes as part of your meeting tonight. So you have an understanding of what transpired for those 3 public hearings.
Okay, all right, great. I rescind my comment. Thank you, Herb.
Roger?
And I think too, like, I think it's smart to bring up, right? Because this is a big deal, right? What we're voting to spend money on, like in terms of the amount and what is left of the existing fund, right? So I think it's good to get it right. It's because it's polemical, but I think they're 2 separate issues. Like, I do think the Conservation Commission, I think my decision and my vote will be based on the presentation that I heard and everything provided to me in a packet, not based on any of those minutes. So I think our vote is sort of pure in that sense, at least in my mind. But I do think the Conservation Commission may wish to take up the curing of the late posting of the minutes for their meetings that they held, right? So, so for the record, I offer that, if that makes sense.
Mary?
I also would just build on that I do think there has been plenty of public access, both with the Conservation Commission and the very informative presentations that were made through the Select Board. So I don't feel like the public has been left out of it, but I do think that you know, the minutes should be documented in a way that will provide an archive moving forward. So I agree with the decision to have the Conservation Commission cure that violation as well. But I feel comfortable voting tonight on this.
Okay. And I will send you the statute, but the written minutes were not eliminated from Act 92. So anyway, so we have a motion.
The written minutes.
Yep, we have a motion.
To
the first part.
Roger, what?
No, I think I'm good. Sorry.
Okay. We have a motion to authorize the expenditure of $130,000 from the Conservation Designated Fund. That was made by Mary, seconded by John. If there's no further discussion, I will go to roll call. So Mary, how do you
Yes.
vote on this first motion? Roger?
Yes.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. So that's 5-0. The second motion, anyone willing to make that? Mary? You're okay.
Muted?
You were,
No.
but now you're not.
Okay, sorry. I move to accept the 186-acre Woody Adams parcel as town land should the VHCB grant be awarded and all required matching funds be secured.
Is there a second?
Second.
So a motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any further any discussion? No. Roll call. Mary?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. The third motion.
I'll just keep going.
You do very well at this, Mary.
I like reading them. It's fun. Let's see. I move contingent upon receiving the VHCB grant award to protect permanently the Woody Adams parcel, the town forest, and the Guile Mountain parcel under a single conservation easement, conveying development rights to UVLT and VHCB as grantees.
Is there a second?
Yes. Second.
Rob, motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes.
Hey, Claudette.
And
Claudette,
yes, Herb.
very quickly, that there was for that last bill was for cemetery corner markers in the cemetery. The bill is for Mount Ascutney memorials, so that's why it's a capital expense.
The AP warrant question.
The AP warrant.
Yep. Okay. So it's not a
hospital.
Not a
grant,
Tracy.
no, I just had approved a timesheet for Tracy Hayes, so that's what I thought it was. So it's specific to the cemetery committee.
Okay. Thank you. And with this Conservation Commission approval, or the Select Board approval of the Conservation Commission motions, I believe there's something I need to sign. Maybe. We can connect tomorrow, and I'll come in tomorrow afternoon if I need to sign something. Or I'll set up an appointment to come in tomorrow afternoon to sign something. Okay, thank you, Conservation Commission. Sorry, I've been talking way too much today. Somebody else's turn. Next item is Select Board appointments. And I'm going to preface this entire discussion. We never have done a really good job of appointments, at least not in the last couple of years. And it seems as though this year we did abysmally bad. It's whether it was Corona or whatever. It just seems to have been one error after another. And I apologize for that happening. Case in point is, well, our lister discussion from earlier today. And at our last meeting, we appointed 2 members to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee at that point had 6 members. They were authorized to go up to 7. I believe there was 1 resignation that would have dropped them to 5, and there were 2 applicants at our last meeting. John Pepper applied and was approved and subsequently resigned. Jeff Swenson, unfortunately, was ineligible to be appointed to the board because of a conflict of interest with his wife being a town employee. And the charge of the Finance Committee specifically states it cannot, an appointee cannot be a spouse of an employee. So that leaves us with 2 Finance Committee positions. We have 1 candidate who was who could not apply last meeting. Am I getting my meetings wrong? Was it 2 meetings ago that we, anyway. So last meeting, Pam Smith had submitted an application, but at that time we did not believe we had any appointments, open appointments. With the resignation of John Pepper and the removal of Jeff Swenson, we do. So we are reconsidering Pam's appointment to the Finance Committee, or considering, not reconsidering. And I see John with his hand up. Yes, John. And John's frozen with his hand up.
He'll unfreeze soon. There he goes.
Sorry. I'm happy to proceed with the consideration of Pam's application. I would like to.
You're muted now, John.
I'm having Vermont internet issues. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I'm happy to move on with consideration of Pam's application. I'd like to actually hold off. I mean, we didn't actually take any action to remove Jeff after having appointing him. So I'd like to not just have the chair declare that he's no longer a member of that commission. I'd like to have a discussion of that. And I would like that to be informed by item 13 on the agenda, which is the MOU with the Norwich School Board for the amendment to the charge for the Finance Committee. I'd like to have that conversation as part of that. But I'm happy to move forward with the consideration of this appointment, which is now, as you say, before us for the second time for this this appointment.
Any thoughts from the board about John's recommendation?
I think it's good. Claudette, your message was to Jeff was also in the packet, right? If I recall, I remember reading that. So it is part of,
do not
I believe it is. And okay, well, I think it is because I just looked
I have not
quickly
seen
through. So, which is just to say that I do think it's we should have a conversation or take an action on that as a board because we make board appointments. But Claudette did, her correspondence was as part of the packet. So it wasn't sort of a side.
If it wasn't in the packet, it was, I did have an email. I sent an email to Jeff and I also telephoned him.
Yes.
As a follow-up to that email. So but anyway, we'll.
Again, there was not a decision made that can be conveyed to him. I've not seen that note. I don't think it is in our correspondence here. I'll look back as we sit here. But I'd like to have this as a conversation. So I'd like to not compound one mistake with another and just have the chair decide to let people know that they're not part of committees that we've appointed them to.
John, at our the 20th meeting last Wednesday, it was brought up in public comments that Jeff's application was in direct violation of the charge of the Finance Committee, and that we discussed my reaching out to Jeff to tell him he was ineligible, and it was approved by the board.
Sorry, I didn't remember that second half, but I'll defer if that was true. I remember us hearing that and thanking Cheryl for bringing that to our attention. I didn't remember that second half, but if that's the case,
I think
I'll defer.
I think it was a little bit by consensus, but consensus these days is like a nodding of heads through Zoom, right? So I mean, you know, it might have been unclear, but I
Madam
remember
Chair, point of order. Your minutes, I think, are pretty clear on what happened. If you just approved your minutes through the consent agenda. So the public comment was Lindbergh questioned new appointment of Jeff Swenson to the Finance Committee, given that the committee charge does not allow membership, including if a spouse is an employee of the town. By consensus, it was agreed that the charge of the committee and the number of vacancies on the committee would be an agenda item for the board's May 27th, 2020 meeting.
That seems different from the by consensus we decided to remove him from the committee.
Oof.
It's enough consensus for me. I think we're just muddying the waters with this. I think we should get on.
Like I said, I'd like to have this as part of the discussion later on with the amendment of the charter, but
Okay. We can add it then. We can discuss it then. So
Pam has her physical and Zoom hands up, so she.
Yep.
I don't. Yeah.
So is there a motion to appoint Pam Smith to the Finance Committee for the remainder of the unexpired 3-year term to expire on June 30th, 2021?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So moved by Mary, seconded by Rob. And Pam, now it's your turn. Tell us why you are wanting to serve. And then if the board chooses, they will ask you some questions. So go ahead, Pam.
All right, Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. First thing I'd like to say is that I think there's some confusion as to how many board members or Finance Committee members are actually on the committee right now. And we have Cheryl and Omer present here at this meeting, so I think that could probably be quickly cleared up. It's my understanding that there are only 5 people on the board right now. Having said that, I did include on my application that I have previously served on the Finance Committee for the town of Norwich, back when it was a position that was on the town warrant, and I was elected to the Finance Committee in 1990 for a 3-year term. Since that time, I've worked, and before, I have worked as someone in the accounting field. I've worked for small businesses in the Upper Valley, for-profits, nonprofits, and my husband and I started our own business, which we ran for 15 years. So I have tremendous amount of expertise in the area of finance, and I would like to utilize that expertise in working toward better finance and fiscal responsibility in the town of Norwich.
Thank you, Pam. Any questions by select board members? Yes, John. John, go
hi,
ahead.
Pam. I don't know if you've seen the packet. Can people hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know if you've seen the packet, but later on in the meeting, we'll be talking about expanding the charge of the Finance Committee to not only advise the Select Board on town budget issues, but also to advise the school board on school board budget issues. I wondered if you were aware of that and if you're happy to serve in that regard as well. It's obviously an addition of work for the committee, and so wanted to make sure you were aware of that order of business that's coming up a little bit later.
Yeah, I was aware of that, John, and that's something that we did back in the 90s when I was on the Finance Committee. before it kind of just disbanded and went into the wilderness. So it's good that it's coming back now. But I'm retired, so I have plenty of free time, and I'm happy to serve in in the town municipal side and the school board side.
Any other select board questions? I'm wondering if Omer can clarify the current membership. Is it 5 currently?
Yeah, so this is
Omer,
Omer,
you need to introduce yourself.
236 Main Street, Chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you.
Did that come through? Yeah.
Yep.
So as of last meeting, before the last town meeting, we had 6 members. Following the town meeting, one of our members, Garrett Baum, was elected to the school board and had to resign from the finance committee. And that's the currently open seat that is a term that expires June 30th, 2021. And then we have 3 terms that expire June 30th, 2020. And then the treasurer's seat is, I believe, perpetual.
Okay. So three members expire the end of next month?
At the end of next month, yes.
Okay. Do you have any sense if the current membership will be reapplying? The ones that expire at the end of June?
I'd have to, I mean, week to week.
Okay.
Yeah, week to week life is changing, so I'd have to check.
Okay. Thank you. So were there any other questions for Pam?
Pam has her hand up again, Claudette.
Yes, Pam.
Yeah, Omer just brought up a point that I sent an email to her, Miranda, and the select board. When you look on the town website, these terms are not specifically noted for all of the committees. I think there's 6 committees that don't have the term ending year for its members. So I was hoping that that could be corrected, because it's hard to know when openings might be coming up on any of these committees. And you should have a memo from me on that.
Probably help us as well.
Okay, thank you, Pam.
Cheryl also has her hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. I think if we look at the Finance Committee charge again, there was a request of the members to select staggered terms, and we didn't do that in that first year of our group being appointed. I think that was a wise suggestion, so that there's staggering of the terms so people can stay on for a certain amount, and then, you know, a new person comes on, they come on for a 3-year term or whatever it is, knowing you can always resign. But that would have been, there would be a good reason to have staggered terms for the members of the committee.
Why it's designed that way.
Sorry?
That's why that was set up that way.
Yeah.
Did everyone opt for a 2-year or a 3-year or what?
Well, we never did establish staggered terms, I guess, will be my comment.
So, okay, this is a, I guess maybe point of order is maybe what they say at this point. This is kind of a bizarre, wide-ranging conversation to me. Like, if that was a concern, someone should bring it to the chair of the committee and then like take it up at one of your meetings, right? Like, I don't personally, and I say this truly respectfully, I almost don't want that to be our issue. Unless the chair resists that as an agenda item, maybe bringing it before us, but I can't imagine it would. So
agree. That doesn't have anything to do with the appointment. I agree.
So I want to like get back to the motion at hand. So that's all I say. So thank you, Cheryl, but also I want to get back to the.
But my point is, how do you know what you're appointing someone for?
Well, Pam's appointment right now is,
I'm pointing Pam. I'm not talking about the committee, right?
Pam's term is clear. It goes to June 30th, 2021 if she's voted in.
right.
So
Yes.
that part is clear. But I do think that, it would be good if the Finance Committee establishes the staggered terms, but that's something they have to take care of.
I agreed.
So, if there are no further comments, we're going to roll call this. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes. And thank you, Pam.
Thanks, Pam.
And moving on to the lister's letter, extending the deadline for the grand list. So I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to give us just a little intro on this agenda item, since the request came from the listers. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. Based on a public comment a couple meetings ago, we have decided as the listers that additional time is needed to file the abstract, and we cannot meet the deadline of June 4th. And our assessor is in agreement with this and would appreciate additional time as well. So the state is offering these extensions. They just would like each town that wants to file for the extension to actually file a letter so that there's a record of that for the town and the property valuation and review. So we have hoped that that will not be a problem, and we're still trying to meet a deadline for the grand list that's earlier than the extension would allow us to have, so that we can get the grand list done.
Okay. So is there, oh, John, yes.
Thanks, Cheryl. I just wondered, so is it the closure of Tracy Hall or inability to get into homes? What's the impact that you guys are seeing?
Some of it had to do with the COVID-19 restrictions on our assessor for a couple weeks. That got resolved, and we also have still the CAMA software from Patriot Properties that is always a bit of a hurdle, and we need to coordinate having that individual working with Patriot to help us roll over the data from CAMA into NEMRIC, and the scheduling of that isn't always easy. So we've made that all happen now, but some of it had to do with that. And those are probably the main two reasons. We're getting the rollover done on the 3rd of June. Once that is done, the downloading of current use information and homestead declaration information, all that has to be done next. And that won't get all done in one day in the office. So we'll need the next week to wrap it up.
Okay, thanks.
Herb?
Cheryl, does this have any impact with regard to setting the tax rate?
I don't know what the select board's plan is. We are trying to get the grand list done on as much of a regular basis as possible. So our hope is to have the grand list lodged in early July. That's the best I can tell you. Again, we have grievances to hold, and we will need access to Tracy Hall to do that, perhaps. So all of this is sort of tied together as to how we collaborate on getting through the grievance process as well, and we're doing our best. We have no idea how many grievances will be filed at this point. So
Just as a follow-up question, if you, so we have the two voter established dates for when tax payments are due, which, you know the process as well as I do. You back up 30 days from August, whatever it is, and we have to have the tax rate set before then. Typically for this year, we would do that July 8th would be the normal tax rate setting timeframe. If we're going to be later than that and it encroaches upon the 30-day minimum, how are we going to meet the August installment requirement?
what is this August date?
Sorry, I gotta look that one up. I think it's like it's near probably August 15th, but let me look it up.
And while Herb is looking that up, I would say that in my my experience with the town has been that we have not always had a grand list available on a regularly scheduled select board meeting date, and that the select board has met at a special meeting to specifically set the tax rate. Maybe some of you have been involved in a board that did that. Maybe Mary? I don't know.
I don't remember that, but I think it's a year where some flexibility, is going to be required. But we can't push it back forever either, so.
Right, and I understand the flexibility. I haven't seen yet from some of the relaxations, like with the penalty and interest payments, if that has occurred with regard to installment dates as well. So that's kind of if you've seen anything that might have relaxed that, which would give us that breather. Otherwise, we're kind of in the same, we got to put something out. To me, having a grand list is not a big deal, but it does, they all line up like dominoes.
Exactly. And we don't know what the state is going to provide for school tax rates.
There's a bill that passed. I sent it around. I'm bringing it up now.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mary.
A question for Cheryl on the grievance process. Would that not be conducted via Zoom? Is there a reason why there needs to be access to Tracy Hall?
Well, we are working on a letter. We're working on a letter right now that always goes out with our documents that are for change of assessment notices, and we have a cover letter that goes out. And since it's after June 15th when the grievances will occur, we always know some people prefer to be there in person. It's easier. It works for them better. If we say they can't, then that will be how we'll have to work it. But our grievances won't be any earlier than June 24th, 25th timeframe.
So would it make sense to plan as if they could not physically be present, just as a plan B? And also to provide some support to people who would feel comfortable with that.
That's what our letter is saying, that we are not planning to have face-to-face grievances, but we will follow the state guidance, and if we can, we will, but we will make available the Zoom.
Yes. Thanks,
So,
Cheryl.
Yep.
Roger.
So Pam has her hand up, but I did want to just jump in and say the last I knew, and I have to check on the status, but the Senate passed S344, which allowed the extension of the property tax deadlines, which is what we're talking about, I believe, but it doesn't absolve us of a responsibility to meet the payments to the school taxes, right? So I think the question that may or may not be an issue is like if we can meet these payments, otherwise we'll have penalties, right? So, I sent this a while ago, so I don't know if there's been latest directives or not, but you'll find out soon, I think, from school folks. Is that right?
That doesn't sound like individual payment relaxation, Herb, right? That sounds like town. So if that's not relaxed for the town, you want to get your taxes in so you can make the payments. Yeah.
Right.
So you know, our goal all along has been a little bit of a break on getting the filing of the abstract done and then getting the grand list lodged as quickly as possible thereafter.
It's just in our interest to be able to pay our school taxes without penalty, and obviously that revolves a little bit about the work that you do. And Herb unmuted himself, so maybe he can provide some context.
I wanted to respond more to Tracy Hall and its ability to have stuff here. I don't have a problem with people setting up appointments. So that's something the listers need to arrange with me from that standpoint. We've had a couple title searches come in. People have to wear masks. If they have gloves, they got to wear the gloves. They have to go to a specific area, and you guys have to clean up probably in between each of the grievances, as a for instance. And we want to limit that time frame very specifically to, you know, hopefully a period of time rather than open-ended discussion. You got to get right to the point. So we've been able to work that with Bonnie on a couple different instances. Same thing, we can work that out with the lister's office.
Our lister grievances are typically 15-minute maximum timeframes.
Okay. I want us to bring us back. Is there anybody, is there some select board member willing to make a motion on this issue?
Do it.
Go ahead, Mary.
I move to approve the request by the Norwich Board of Listers for an extension to complete work relating to the duties of listers and/or assessors until August 15th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by John. Any further discussion? And I think we all know that we've got to set a tax rate. Oh,
yes,
Pam.
and
Sorry.
Pam had her hand up. I'm sorry, Pam.
Go ahead, Pam.
Yeah, on the topic of when the tax bills will go out, the state has said that the tax bills are due within 30 days of the day that they are mailed. So if we can't mail on our normal schedule to have them due on August 14, which is the day that was in the town warrant, they are just due 30 days from whatever day they go in the mail. On Monday, June 1st, I'm attending a webinar. The topic is things to consider when your tax rates are not ready when you normally print tax bills. So I've signed up for that webinar. I don't know if it's something that Herb or select board members are open to attending, but I'm certainly happy to forward you the email for registration to see if you could get registered to attend as well. It's Monday, June 1st from 9 to 10. But the tax bills are due 30 days from whenever you put them in the mail, irrespective of what was on the town warrant. The state has already clarified that.
I understand that. I'm throwing back at you guys what you threw at me with a tax payment from last February when I said that I would stay open till 6 o'clock to take stuff. You argued with me that the taxes were due at 4:30 that particular day, and anything after that specific time that the voters voted on was late. So this is the exact same situation where voters have very specifically set the tax installment dates.
Can I move us back? We have a motion on the table. We have a second to the motion, I believe.
Yeah, we do.
And the understanding that we need to set a tax rate and we need to send out tax bills, that's not the motion that was made. The motion was to grant the listers an extension. So are there any other comments on the motion? Seeing none. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Claudette's a yes.
Thank you.
So then April 2020 revenue expense report. Herb, I'm going to send this over to you.
Okay. In the packet, you received the Monthly report through April, which is period 10. Included was the balance sheet, as well as the typical thing that you see for the revenues and expenditures. In addition, there was some replies back from the question marks that I promised to get you from the March report. So those are in the packet if you have further questions on those. Sorry, I'm battling a little fruit fly in here today. What I wanted to point out are a couple things that one adjustment on the revenues that I had Becky do for as a journal entry was under the revenues right under property tax. We had not put the actual amount of revenue in yet that we received for the other monetary articles. So that adjustment has been made. We did receive the education tax retainer that I was a little bit nervous about at the last meeting. So that's in there. And then at the bottom of the revenues, I just wanted to point out there's some handwritten language there, which again is just trying to normalize the revenues a little bit for you by sort of taking out the DEC and the FEMA related stuff so that it's a little bit more comparable to what your budget is. So you can see that budget-wise, you're pretty close to your anticipated revenues for the total year, 10 months through the year. So we've got about, another 100 grand or so to get up to, where I would, not 100 grand, but, a little bit less than that in order to feel comfortable with what the actual budget is. But you have received the bulk of your revenues at this point, which is your tax payment related stuff. On the expenditure side, since most of the questions that I had were in the previous couple of monthly reports, there is one item that I've under the police department under capital expenditures, which is on page 10 of 29. The designated fund for special equipment. There's a journal entry that needs to be done here to correct this. That line item cannot exceed $2,500. There was an appropriation that you approved for some cruiser equipment that comes out of the designated fund. This line item happened to be hit with that. It's not the proper line item for that. As you recall, designated funds, this is just new appropriations to go into the designated fund, not the conduit for the expenses that come out of the actual fund itself.
Any questions from the board?
I have a couple more. Oh, sorry.
No,
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Herb.
No, just a couple more. There's another one of those similar designated fund overages that were done appropriately. So under the highway garage where you have a designated fund for equipment, again, that should only be 40,000, not 43,753. So again, there's another expenditure that you authorized, but got put on the wrong line item. And then similar to the revenues, you can see the little bit of the normalized stuff at the tail end of the expenditures, where if you take out the scams and then the FEMA related stuff to the July 1 storm, which is the finishing up of the Needham culvert and the payback of the line of credit from the revenue that we've received, your budget through about 10 months is just over $4 million. That at April, it should be about 83% of budget. So with that normalized situation, you're about 85%. But again, there's still some 100% payments that are already in here. So it's you're probably a little bit under the 85% for the year. So you're pretty good both on the revenue and the expenditure side at this point of the year.
Now I'll ask for questions. And Mary, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was noticing a discussion about delinquent taxes. And I noticed that specific people were named. And when I first came on this board, I believed that specific people would be named and even published in the town report. And then it was felt that that was not proper to do that as a public announcement of who can't pay their taxes. So I'm just wondering about that.
Yep, that is public information. Some towns, I think, I wasn't here when you did it, but I think at some point in the past, you must have voted, the voters must have voted not to include the delinquent taxpayers in the annual report. But
Yes,
that doesn't mean that it's not public
but it's not
information.
public. Okay.
So, yeah, and just speaking of that, there is a number of, there are a number of delinquent taxpayers that represent a pretty good chunk of change. The idea is my idea is to be a little bit more aggressive with that. You have done tax sales in this town in the past. I think that it's been somewhat not taken care of well in the past year. So my idea is to start being not more aggressive, but a little bit firmer with those that are delinquent to see what the real issue is behind it. If it's just because the town hasn't been pestering them, or if there's a real reason behind it. I'm used to doing this from Fairhaven by many more delinquent taxpayers than you could ever imagine here. And it's really a function of getting those folks on a payment plan and trying to get them back up to snuff. You clearly have some folks that are purposely not paying. And then there are those that really want to pay but can't. And then you have people in between there that sort of come and go on an annual basis, depending on their personal situations in any particular given year. So I think once we get into, once we get a little bit more control of what's been going on with COVID and our finances, getting our staffing back up to snuff in the finance office, you'll see there'll be a little bit more of that with the idea of trying to get those delinquent taxes paid so that other property taxpayers are not shouldering that burden.
Go ahead, Mary.
I support that approach. It's a very uncomfortable subject. And I think sometimes there are reasons where it's difficult to pay. And it is a good point that, people that are paying do carry the ones that don't fulfill their obligation. So as uncomfortable as it is, I'm supporting Herb's direction in this.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other comments by the board? And I was the one that had asked about the delinquent taxes, and I must say I was a little surprised that names were included. I think I had just asked for the dollar amount. But John?
I would say, Herb, I thought it was really helpful to have the notations there, normalizing those numbers, comparing them to the, carving out the FEMA and the BEC numbers. That was helpful to follow that. I just want to confirm that first set of financials was April. The second set was written March there, and I'm pretty sure that the first one was April, but I just wanted to confirm that.
Yes, the first set that were in the packet are your April financials. The second set that's in there regurgitated the March stuff because there were some question marks, you remember, that I wanted to get answers for, and that corresponds with Becky's email to me. So I included the whole thing so you folks had a more comprehensive package.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions about the revenue expense report? Seeing none, we're going to move down to the fiscal year 21 budget. Part of the reason I wanted to keep this on the agenda is because I think it's going to be important that we keep it on the agenda. And the correspondence that was in the packet kind of provides the general public with some information on what we as a town have been looking at. There's some info in the packet from from VLCT that's relevant to this discussion. And one of my big concerns has been that we may, that the state, because of the dire financial situation, was going to not pay out the grants that had been approved for fiscal year 20. And I reached out to Tim and Jim, and I I actually got a message today about that and that I can share if people are interested.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
My computer is really, really slow today, so hold on. I think it's dragging from the heat, just as I am dragging from the heat.
Should we add filler? Should we add like a monologue while you're looking for that?
I have it. It just okay. Here we go.
There you go.
So the transportation bill, the House currently the House is passing a transportation bill. The bill, I'm reading this verbatim from Tim Briglin. The bill explicitly tells VTrans not to reduce funding for towns and goes further to increase the state's maintenance budget, albeit less of an increase that had originally been planned. The bill authorizes VTrans to spend more on town road programs and maintenance in the event the state gets additional stimulus dollars from the federal government in the fiscal year 21 year. So kind of in a, I mean, I would say answers more of 21 than 20, but at least there's some hope that the grants won't be pulled. And I didn't know if anybody else wanted to comment. Herb, have you heard any late breaking news?
No, probably no news is good news, but the the way things go nowadays. No, I haven't heard anything lately, but on the same token, because of missing an assistant last week, I haven't been able to really dive into anything either than just trying to get things going to get a packet and everything out the door. I think I pretty much showed my cards in the email correspondence back and forth between me and you from that standpoint. I think you understood some of the, the pointed questions I asked Cheryl, because I am nervous about when we set a tax rate and how we deal with it and cash flow and stuff. I do, thank goodness we did get the last of the FEMA funding reimbursed, because I think, that was a nice shot in the arm. And that might help us with the cash flow as we go through, but nothing really new that I'm aware of.
Okay. I also wanted to just point out to the board, Rob did an excellent job of digging into some Department of Labor stats. I sent out just an initial thing that you really couldn't read, just to show that the April unemployment, the increase from March, which was down about 1%, to April for the town of Norwich specifically jumped up to 6% unemployment. And there are, hopefully the trend is not going to continue upward.
Yes, and I thought that was very interesting too, and just to see some of the figures from some of the other towns, and highest figure I saw was 24%, might have been in the Northeast Kingdom. And I think Hartford might have been 14 or so. So, we have been affected in Norwich, but I think there are other towns that are really, been affected quite severely, a lot more than we have. So just saying.
Even close by, Woodstock came in at 22%, which with the Woodstock Inn and some of the other businesses being shut down.
Tourism industries, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. What pulls my heartstrings is just the food aspect. Doing the Victory Garden thing and trying to think about helping Willing Hands, and I just don't like the fact, especially that children are going hungry in Vermont. And my church has always done a lunch fill-in kind of lunch sandwich thing, but I think we're going to have to double it and triple it, and just try to make sure everybody's fed. So that's that's the thing that I worry about.
Linda Cook
And
has her
I
hand
do
up
want to. Who does?
Linda.
Yes, Linda, go ahead.
Linda,
And finish what you were, Claudette, finish what you were saying. I just have a question to ask when you're done.
Oh, I also wanted to
Are you
say
done
that
on the comment?
I wanted to remind people that the Citizens Assistance Fund is still out there. So your tax money goes into that pot of money as well as your bottle returns. So don't hesitate, people, to approach John Farrell, our town service officer. That was it, Linda.
Okay, the question I was just wondering if the board, someone from the board or Herb, can you hear me? Hello?
Yep.
yes.
Yes.
You can hear
Hello?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Oh, sorry. It went quiet for me. Just
You
wondering
muted
if
your
someone
own
from the board
phone.
or Herb can do a general. Oh, am I muted? Is it?
No,
No,
you're
keep
good.
talking.
Oh my gosh. So I'm gonna
Go
unmute
ahead.
you, Linda. Okay, you're muting yourself. Go ahead. Go. Just
Thank
talk.
you.
We're hearing you. Go. Go. Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't even touching it. Okay. What I was hoping is somebody from the select board or
Excuse me.
Herb could do a short summary of the VLCT's letter, which is talking about a number of recently passed legislature, the S344, and how it's giving the select board more options to make decisions on changes without voter approval, which in the past has required voter approval, and wondering if somebody can do that with what's here in the packet.
I guess I would
I
wonder
mean-
why what's in the packet isn't sufficient. But that's
Right.
my question.
I'm trying to
But
make it a
I'll go
public
ahead.
record for those that. I was just trying to make this a public record so that the public is aware of the things the select board can do now that it hasn't been able to do in the past without voter approval with these new legislative, whatever you call, like the S344. I mean, they can
Give me a
change the
for
tax
instance,
rate
Linda.
without
I'm
voter
not sure.
approval. They can. Well, I'm just reading what's in the letter.
Herb has his hand
How
up.
the S344, it allows select board without voter approvals to reduce the municipal property tax rate, extend or establish a new line and method for paying taxes, establish a grace period for reduce or waiver of interest fees, penalties with tax payments. It gives select board temporary authority to reduce but not increase the municipal but not the education property tax. These are all options that are available to the select board going forward. Can you also, is that also three? Yes. You can decide not to hold any tax sales. Are any of these things something that you're going to consider?
Can't tell you, but Herb, go right ahead.
Can I just offer, Madam Chair, that if there are any individuals that are out there that are feeling hard pressed on making property tax payments and stuff, that they reach out to my office. As the delinquent taxpayer, I have the authority to set up payment arrangements and that sort of stuff. So if you need some assistance, just contact my office and we can talk about those particular things. The particulars in the VLCT thing may not be well understood by the average citizen.
And if we do anything that is listed in the VLCT piece paper, it will be at a meeting, fully warned with information. So I don't want to kind of disregard your comments, Linda, but I mean, if we sent out to the public or made available to the public every little thing that's been coming down from the state, you'd have a book to every resident in this town. And sometimes the information is just, you get one directive one week and then it's altered the next week, and it's kind of impossible to keep up with a town-wide information sheet. So go to the website or keep watching. Roger?
Or I would just say, or respectfully listen to this meeting. Like Herb asked, will this affect the delaying of taxes? And then I talked about S344, right? And then, and then it was in the packet. So I think the very specific question is very much on our minds, and we are actually talking about it, right? It's just, we're not just taking a motion on it, but it is of discussion, right? So that's all that I'll offer.
I know that may not satisfy you completely, Linda, but it's the best we can do. Any other board comments? Okay, then we're gonna take our 10-minute break. We'll resume at 8:17. Our next item on the agenda is the town manager report. So Herb, it's going to be over to you.
Hi. So town manager's report, there's some information in your packet, as typically there always is. If you have questions on that, people like the chief are here to answer her particular report. We're continuing to move along with a local hazard mitigation plan work. And then also the latest update for my COVID related thing. Coming up in a little bit, we'll have some more discussion with regard to vehicles and everything, but I want to come back to the Route 132 box culvert / bridge item because I wanted to have a motion in the packet tonight, but after some discussion and some angst, or I had some discussion with Claudette, and we mutually agreed not to put something in there. So I'll get back to that in a second, but I just want, so for your edification, the current designated fund for bridges has an amount, for those of you that didn't see your email, basically we've got about 333,000 in the current fund for bridges right now, with another 40,000 anticipated to come in with the next fiscal year. And then for the equipment grant stuff, which is where vehicles are purchased from for the highway department, you currently have almost $189,000 with an additional $20,000 coming in for the next fiscal year. I would be remiss if I didn't talk Becky through at me right before the meeting. It's that stipend timeframe for folks. So board members that would like to get their stipend, please let me know. I already have feedback from Mary and John Langus, but for the other three, that would be great to know. Just shoot me an email if you would like to have it or not. I did have a discussion with the VLCT attorney over the personnel issue that we talked about last week during the special meeting. Where's Claudette? You moved on me on the screen. So Claudette, we should have on our June 10th agenda an update to this. I did send a little bit of an email earlier today that's confidential. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but what I'm looking for June 10th is not only to get you up to date, but the attorney representing us can be there to give you what he gave me yesterday. And I don't want to be the monkey in the middle in relaying that. So I think it's important for him to tell you those issues. But the result of some of that discussion is what you received it culminates in the email that you received that I forwarded to you. One thing I'd like to be able to do as part of this process is to have a couple members of the select board work with me through this particular process. I specifically would like to have John Langus with me with his background in the legal stuff, and then I'll be happy to work with anybody else on this. But this is going to be a process I would not be surprised if it took a couple years to work through. So just to give you a heads up, I think you generally know what I'm talking about. I know I'm talking in code right now on purpose because most of anything that I talk about in depth will be subject to executive session. So again, June 10th, I'd like to have this discussion again in an executive session. Coming back to the information that's in your packet with regard to 132, and one of the major reasons why Larry's been hanging out late tonight is that we're in I mentioned to you before the general situation with the Route 132 box culvert near Bowen Hill Road seems to be failing enough that Larry is very concerned about it. The V-Trans has a little bit of a different opinion. They do agree that at least there's some repair work that needs to occur. I think that Larry is at a higher level of concern such that the box culvert needs to be replaced, not repaired. There are basically three options available to you. Very quickly, the three options are do nothing, the do nothing alternative, the current alternative, which we talked about before, which was we've got a structures grant in and kind of awaiting the structures grant and the funding that comes with that and following the course of the process. It's almost a prescriptive process that we would have to adhere to. And the third option is authorizing me on your action to walk across the street or, to find some local, a local loan, short-term loan that would be basically for a year tops, as you're authorized to do under that, to actually do the project as a local project now. The three alternatives are generally subject to the need to have, if in any of those particular situations, I'm banking on the fact that Larry at some point is going to say, no more. I've got to reduce this road down to at least one lane, whether it be for anticipated construction, quick construction, or the do nothing alternative to protect public safety. It's about $31,000 for the type of traffic light systems that you need out there that V-Trans recommends. There may be a slightly less expensive version where it doesn't have the overhead traffic signals associated with it. But the bottom line is, in each of those scenarios, you're going to have that. For the do nothing situation, that's just a run-on bill every 6 months until you decide to fix this. The middle alternative, which is the current status quo situation, works, but again, you're probably talking about 2 construction seasons before we actually get the construction going. So if you think about 31,000 bucks for say 2 years, you're at $120,000. That's not even construction costs. That's just trying to keep the traffic going. That's probably like half the construction cost right there. The third cost, walk across the street, get a loan, get it done. There are probably some hungry contractors that are out there that would be willing to do it, and you would minimize the amount of money for those traffic signals. Therefore, the money that might go for the other 2 alternatives can, clearly it would be a function of that sort of loan that you'd be taking out. There's a very specific reason why I gave you the designated fund amount earlier, is that there is a pretty good chunk of change in that designated fund right now to either probably pretty much pay the whole thing, at least construction-wise, or a fairly good chunk of that. I did not, so for several reasons, I did not give you a motion. One, I'm very nervous about putting out there a public safety issue and potentially doing a do nothing scenario, and then Jen goes out there with blue lights someday because someone hit the guardrail and went in or something along those lines. That I don't want that. The other is that I really don't haven't quite figured you folks out yet with regard to this and what direction you would want to go in. So I didn't want to start down a process of emotion and then get you in an unproductive state in terms of battling between what is the right motion. And then the third thing is that we really haven't had a full discussion of the particular alternatives that are out there, and wanted to have some sort of frank, productive discussion about this and what seems to happen. I think I've tipped my hand enough to sort of say, I'm kind of thinking I'm flowing you toward that third alternative of let's just do this. There are a number of firms that are out there. This would have to go out to bid, but there are a number of firms that are out there that work kind of in a precast environment where they do precast wing walls, and they might have these box culverts. They can kind of precast them. They bring a crane in, set them, fill it in, pave it over, and they're done. I think Langus, Mary, and maybe Claudette remembers, there was a gentleman that came in from Bean Group back when we put this out to bid when the time frame Andy wasn't here. He's one of those individuals that kind of does these precast situations. So anyway, that's what I'm kind of throwing on the table. There is information in the packet that kind of summarizes up to a degree what I talked about or leading up to with those traffic lights and what Larry has put together. Larry is a licensed civil and structural engineer, so he generally knows what he's talking about, but he's here basically to answer questions that I can't answer or even to add further information to this. And the chief has hung out as well to where if there may be need to talk about kind of a public safety side of it. So is that enough sort of introduction, Claudette, from your perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
And I know Mary had her hand up. Go ahead, Mary.
If you went with option 3 of getting a loan and just getting it done, is it reasonable to expect that it could be done before winter? Or do you not know yet?
I honestly wouldn't. I would have to go out to bid, so I would be able to answer that question more fully based on any response to the bid process that I got. But I can establish the RFP such that it would be done before the close of the construction season. I just don't know if I would get response that way.
Right. I also, as probably a parent, walk over that bridge and have been just looking at it for years. And, I'm not a structural engineer, but I'm seeing changes in it that I have not ever seen before, walking over that for years. And I can imagine a vehicle just crushing it at some point. And I would never want to see anything like that.
Mm-hmm. And that's the major concern, because Route 132 is a higher volume road. It does have some
bigger trucks and so forth.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
So it sort of hits the priority category here.
Yep.
The other piece of this is I have mentioned that there's a pretty significant sum of money in the bridge fund right now that could pay for most of this. It may be that you might not have to take a loan out, but if you do if you expend that whole fund, that is your entire bridge fund. So anything else that comes down the road, you're sort of necessarily setting you up for whatever is going to happen in a budget discussion, or again, replenishing that fund. And so I'm not saying no, it's a bad idea. I'm just saying that we could pay for the whole thing. We could pay for part of it, get a loan for part of it, do a loan for the whole thing, see where we're at that point. If you go for a loan, it has to be short term, basically 1 year. And then if you do, and then you have to ask the voters at some point to authorize anything, or is it 1 year, 5 years? I'm drawing a blank now. But it has to be short term. And then if you go anything above that, then you got to ask the voters.
Roger, you had a comment?
I guess two things. So hi, Roger of Route 132. I live on Route 132. And I wonder, and I think I don't have Mary's eye. I don't see what she sees necessarily. But so I guess two questions. Like one, does anyone, we don't have to talk about it if no one else is curious at all about Larry's opinion differing from VTrans. Does anyone want to hear more about that if nobody does?
I would like to hear that.
So VTrans says one thing, Larry says another. So there's a battle of the expertise. So I'm curious about that. And then the other thing I'm curious about is where this is in your capital budgeting plan, if at all, if this is part of your timeline for capital budgeting. And if it's not,
yep,
then why not?
Yeah,
And
originally Larry can answer those particular questions in terms of the capital budget. Yep, and then also the differences that we find with V-Trans. And I've even suggested to Larry that if there's a huge dichotomy between the two perspectives, I think it would be worth spending a little time to have a independent engineer evaluate it and add to the discussion as to whether it's leaning on the side of total replacement, the way Larry's talking about, or more on the side of V-Trans, which says, yeah, we just stuffed some stones. Yes, it's cracked and all that. I think that V-Trans is not fully understanding the nature of what we're looking at. But
And-
anyway, Larry can answer those.
Okay, and then I'll unmute Larry. And then the other thing is just, it is a unique road, as everyone's pointed out, that there's a lot of Norwichians who go this way, but there's plenty of like Stratford and Thetford folks coming from the other way. So I wonder if that holds any power for getting taxed money from the state right now. So that's another question. All right, I'm gonna unmute Larry.
All right, well, Larry Wiggins, Public Works. I think the first thing that needs to be said is that if you're discussing options and repairs or whatnot, if you haven't seen the pitches, you're not talking just about wing walls. If you look at the pitches, you'll see that the deck of this so-called bridge, it's actually a concrete rigid frame, has experienced some severe corrosion due to salt, what is exposed on the downstream side. It would be probably unwise to assume that that's only in that area. So probably the deck of that bridge has been unprotected and has probably suffered similar corrosion aspects. So it's not just the wing walls and the guardrail, it's also probably a bridge that needs repair anyways, and I'm just making an assumption that whatever you see on the outside edge of the wall, if you look at the pictures, you'll see that the concrete is severely eroded on the downstream side. I suspect that's probably taken place in other places on the bridge that we can't see. With regards to the capital improvements, yes, I did have it as one of the bridges that was in the 5 or 6 year plan, but we all know that bridges move by their dynamics and their ability to withstand the traffic, et cetera, et cetera. I think probably most importantly that what we're looking at here is what was referred to earlier as blue lights. These guardrails aren't guardrails. They're not attached to anything anymore. They don't have any integrity. Both downstream wing walls have broken away from the structure. This is not oh gee, that's not a serious issue. And I don't really think that V-Trans would argue with you that it's probably, it's a serious issue. I only spoke to, I got an email from the bridge engineering department, and they said it could be repaired with minor road work and bridge abutment repairs, but yet have refused to define exactly how it would do that. I think that's curious that no one really wants to say how that was done. So I spoke to Chris Bump in District 4, and he interpreted it as, well, what we do is we just put a lot of big stones behind the retaining wall, and we do a little this and a little that, and kind of rebolt the guardrail back on. And I'm saying, well, even those repairs would be pretty serious as far as costs go, and I don't think that he would disagree with that. I think you're looking at a situation where no one can predict when these walls are going to move enough such that the material underneath the pavement is going to slough, going to fall down onto the downstream side. Somebody's going to come along, maybe the middle of the night, who knows when, and they're going to drive over the bridge, and some of the pavement's not going to be there. It's a highly trafficked road. It does have a lot of heavy truckload, according to my crew. They tell me there's a lot of trucks go down through there.
Yes.
I don't think anybody's an expert that says, well, it's going to fail tomorrow or it'll last another year. I don't think anybody can say that, but I don't think that's the way you want to approach this. I think you want to either close it, make a one-lane bridge out of it, or just close it and repair it. Take your pick.
And Larry, just as a follow-up regarding, because I want myself to start thinking about capital budgeting and thinking through that document, right? So this was flagged as a higher priority than some others? Can you refresh my memory on that? Where does this lie in the priority list of your bridge repairs? This was always number one?
No, this was out about 5 years out, I believe. But by the fact that it's changing ever so in the last year, well, I've been watching since I was hired at Norwich. It's been changing pretty much regularly. I contacted V-Trans about a year ago and said, well, this wing wall is moving. And they went out and looked at it and said, nah, don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. And I kind of was shocked at that. And then this time the other wing wall broke off and the other wall moved even more. And I said, well, it looks like you got a serious issue now. And so I got this response back of, well, we can do some minor repairs. Well, I guess I'd like to see what somebody's minor repairs are that aren't a significant repair when they get through with it, such that it costs some serious money to repair it. You're not going to go out there and spend $10,000 and have a repair, I don't believe.
Okay, thank you.
To answer your question, it was out to the 5th and 6th year, but by the fact that the wing walls have cracked off, things have changed with structural integrity and the ability of the bridge to withstand the load. So therefore, it's now moved up, in my mind, to a more pressing concern.
Okay.
Mary?
I think, Larry, you had talked about Elm Street Bridge and one other bridge that's also in pretty bad shape. How are they looking in comparison to this? Like, are we going to have bridge work next 3 years, or we have to sort of...
The secret to bridges is if you repair them earlier, it costs you a heck of a lot less. Elm Street Bridge, from what I can see and from the photos that were taken by V-Trans when they were underneath the bridge, it looks like there are some cracks in the deck. And I have yet to confirm that because I can't get close enough to see that. I don't have a high-powered pair of binoculars or whatever. We also have railing issues on that and some other abutment issues, but it's probably a deck repair or replacement at best. And the sooner you get to it, the better off you'll be. The other bridge that I was referring to is what is called Bridge 39 on Beaver Meadow, which is down by Huntley. That's a situation where the rebar, which is called stirrups, which actually handles the shear in the bridge, are exposed and have been exposed for quite a while, and they're becoming more and more corroded with time. There again, the sooner you address that, the more likely you are to actually catch it to the point where you might be able to salvage those stirrups. If you let it go, they're just going to break off and they're not going to be able to serve their purpose, and you're going to spend a lot more money. Probably again another bridge deck replacement, not an entire bridge, but a deck replacement.
Deck replacement. Thanks, Larry.
So, Doug, this comment is being addressed to Doug. Please don't use the chat to ask substantive questions, because the general public can't, especially people on the phone, can't see that chat.
So, want me to repeat it? Want me to read it, Claudette?
There were a few that were coming up.
So Doug Wilberdine asks, is there a 10-year empirical analysis that has been done of the dedicated funds and their depletion? 2 are negative and many are being zeroed out. Any concern with the depletion of reserves? Herb points out that the select board has had the finance committee look at this issue. Doug thanks Herb and says that it would be helpful to see the report as the funds are decreasing rapidly, to have loans supporting them and others are low. He's referring to the designated funds, and he talks about that the fire designated fund for the potential new fire truck is the exemption. He asks then about V-Trans reports. So it's now part of our meeting.
Okay. Any other select board comments? I'd kind of like to know what you guys are thinking of the 3 options. The do nothing, cut it down to 1 lane with the lights, or fix it as soon as possible. And I see Mary with her hand up.
I think it should be just fixed. as soon as possible.
Agree.
Roger?
Yeah, certainly it should be fixed as soon as possible. I don't have a method or way of thinking about when. I know the Finance Committee has done some work about when it's appropriate to take on debt and when it's appropriate to use the designated funds, but I'm not as confident as I want to be on that. But that being said, I think it should be done. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Rob?
Yeah, I've walked by there myself, and all we need is one good July storm, and you're going to have some serious trouble there. The sooner the better getting it done, and with any luck, maybe you can get a hold of contractors quicker and at a better price than waiting.
Herb, I have a question for you. Could we move to have you go out for requests for or bid proposals? And then once we get the bid proposals and the dollar amounts attached to those, decide how we'll fund it?
I think that's a good idea because it buys a little time. We go out to RFP, we see what the amount's going to be. We may find out if we're going to get a structures grant in the interim as well, and then you might have a bigger handle on it. But I think too, going out to bid, what I think you're kind of committing yourself to saying we do want to move forward with the, essentially either I think it's replacement, but maybe it's termed, significant repair. But that I think gives enough of a go-ahead for Larry and I to be dealing with some stuff, because nothing's going to be done within the next 2 weeks. So even, you're going to have a couple meetings before we're going to get back a full RFP process and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that makes sense.
Good.
Are select board members comfortable with that approach?
Mhm.
I see shaking.
Yes.
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 So is anybody willing to try to craft a motion addressing that? Or I can.
We need a motion to just authorize him to get an RFP. I don't know that we do. We just need a motion later to approve it or not, right?
Okay.
So the record would show that there's general consensus or agreement that allowing the town manager to go out to RFP on this makes sense.
That works for me.
Okay.
And I see nodding of heads that that approach is good.
Thank you.
Any other thing to report, Herb, on from your end?
No, because the truck stuff is different agenda items. So unless you have questions for me, your next meeting I'll have that's targeted for the written report. So you might have more questions at that time frame, but right now I don't have anything else.
Okay. So then we'll move on to item 11, the SimQuest proposal. Anything?
I do not actually. Rob and I have to catch up on reviewing this together from that standpoint. So I know I've reported in the past that I've received the roadmap, and I think I shared that with you, so you have an idea of the costs that we're talking about, which is financial significant. But I would like to rely on Rob's expertise and along with SimQuest, because they're willing to help us in answering questions on that, to see if there's a phased approach to this, or it has to be an all or nothing type of thing. And if it can be phased, what's the logical phasing?
I've been remiss in getting in touch with her to discuss it and try and bring Carrie into the discussion so I have a better understanding of what they're actually stating that they'll do for the fees that they're proposing.
Okay. So
And
that's
the only other thing, Madam Chair, was just at some point you were curious to see if we could make some of this information public, and based on the feedback from SimQuest, it's not a function of protecting their cost items, but maintaining it right now confidentially is important because it shows what our vulnerabilities are, and we don't want to have the vulnerabilities out there in the public.
Right.
So I apologize I would love to be able to just show it, but I feel compelled not to at this point.
And
yes, Roger.
And that makes sense, but and I totally appreciate and get that. I will say that our citizens love the good old, good healthy competition with multiple bids, and so this seems like it may or may not be something that is so large that you may wish to put it out to bid, and I'm not saying that it necessarily qualifies as that, but it's.
Oh, this whole thing is going out to bid. Oh,
okay.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
The whole point of bringing in SimQuest was they did for free the assessment, and they, as part of that process, I was telling them that I'm trying to develop an RFP and I need to know sort of estimates of that. So everything they've done is the understanding that it's going out to bid. There's no foregone conclusions. This is a SimQuest job.
So that's great. And then thinking about how you might do that without exposing our vulnerabilities might be interesting, but I'm sure you're on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was my big question. So how can we discuss it without
a lot of the expenses are just basically just standard maintenance expenses and don't reveal anything specific.
Okay.
And part of the discussion that's intended with Rob and Carrie with me is that if there is some kind of a summary offering that we can provide that can be publicly absorbed, that we clearly will, I clearly want to be able to release something if I possibly can.
Okay. And moving on to item 12, the proposal from DPW to purchase not one, not two, but 3 trucks. So I'm sending it off to Herb again. If you could.
So with the understanding that Claudette is either going to vote yes or abstain from the vote, I will continue with the stuff, but I know
I won't abstain from this one.
Just teasing, but I know that Mary, Claudette, and I know when Linda was on the board, there was a major concern about the fleet and its status with regard to DPW, mostly with regard to the volume of vehicles, not necessarily the condition of the vehicles. But since coming on board, we've tried to get a better handle on the fleet inventory. Larry has taken on that work. He provided a level of information during the budget process, including in the capital budget that you were provided whenever it was, November, December, January timeframe. I specifically asked him to update that information for this meeting. So that information is in your packet. What I'm going to do is turn it over to Larry so he can give you a general condition report of the fleet and where he's at in terms of literally offline vehicles that some folks may think are online vehicles because they're parked near the transfer station, and how that's troubling to the daily operations that he has to deal with. So now I'm going to pass the buck over to Larry.
Okay. Well, as Herb said, he asked me to summarize the current situation, but also put in some of the material that I had submitted, but revise it and update it for the budget process. So besides my memo of request for the 3 trucks, you should also have received my overall equipment plan for the next 5 or 6 years. You should have received the specific requests, what I call capital budget requests for each one of those. And at the very end, you should have received a package of all the equipment above a chainsaw, shall we say, at the Public Works Garage, which is considered a vehicle or something that can be towed. To follow up with what Herb said, I have taken 2
vehicles, truck 2 and truck 11, out of service. They were taken out of service about 6 months or more ago. So those 2 trucks do sit in the yard, but we have taken them off the records, out of the insurance, off the registrations, and they're just waiting to be sold. My request, however, is for replacement of 3 trucks, which I think are make a lot of it's just prudent fiscally to replace these vehicles. And to go through my memo very quickly, I've asked for truck 12, which is a Ford 550. This truck is a 2000, therefore it's 20 years old. This truck has been rolled over. It's been passed back and forth between departments. It's had quite a history, but the biggest issue about why we want to replace this truck is this is a frontline truck for the Public Works Department for winter maintenance. It's what we need to salt, sand, and plow with, and this truck is not available for that in most of those regards. I can put a wing on it, but I would have to redo the front hydraulics and plow at great expense to do that, so it doesn't make any sense to put a wing on it. So therefore, the truck really can't support a wing. And so my proposal, very simply, is to purchase a Ford 550 similar to the one that we have, which is the other 550, which works very well for us. It's a 2017 Ford 550. And tried to explain there exactly what my thoughts are about going out to bid. And what I had proposed was if I could buy the cab and chassis, and I did quite a bit of research trying to get a municipal discount from Lebanon Ford, and they gave me that finally after a lot of effort. And I got a number from them for a Ford 550 for the cab and chassis. And then for purposes of following suit with trying to be in line with the financial policy, I would go out to bid for the dump body, sander, plow, wing, and sander controls. But the reason to buy the cab and chassis is to try to expedite the process such that we might hope to have the truck maybe in the middle of next winter, if not before, if we were lucky. I've been told by almost everybody that puts trucks out and also that puts bodies and sanders on them, that it's at least a year now to get a truck online. So with that said, truck 12 would be roughly around $109,000. I've got budgetary numbers for the dump body, sander, plow, wing, and sander controls, and the municipal discount, and that would be the cost of the truck outfitted, and that does not include any trade-in or sale of the existing truck. The other trucks that I would like to replace are strictly, again, for the purposes of cost avoidance. Truck 6, we were, well, first of all, truck 6 is the 2006 3500 Dodge Ram 4-wheel drive with 223,000 miles on it. A lot of that doesn't work. And what happened was that we didn't have, the ABS wasn't working, the ABS light came on, and emergency brake light came on. And Sonny made his best attempt to fix it, but wasn't able to, so we brought it over to Key Dodge, and Key Dodge looked at it and said, well, I guess you got a few other problems here besides just that. And if you look at my memo to the town manager, you will find a number of items that they've identified that need to be addressed on this truck. Their price to make all those things, make all those repairs is around $7,300. And Sonny can cut that down to like $3,500. But again, at the end of the day, you've got a 14-year-old truck with 223,000 miles waiting to break again very shortly, I'm sure. I did some research on the Vermont state contracts, and I looked at Chevys, Fords, GMCs, and Toyotas on the state contract, and the cheapest one of those is a 2020 Chevrolet Silverado pickup, 4-wheel drive, which is $24,000. That includes a 3-year warranty. That price does not include any reduction for trade-in or private sale of the current truck. And the truck, as I understand it, looking on NADA right now, is worth maybe $6,000. So if you followed suit with Key Dodge, you'd be putting $7,000 of repair into a $6,000 truck. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Truck 9 is 2008 Dodge Ram. That one's 12 years old, four-wheel drive pickup, got 40,000 miles on it. It's been through some accidents. I'm talking to the crew. We use that year-round for buildings and grounds and for highway. It's a truck even the custodian uses to haul trash, those kind of things. And I am proposing that we replace that with a crew cab pickup, which would give the department one vehicle that would carry more than two men. Currently, that doesn't exist. And so if we were carrying people to job sites, seminars, training, etc., we have a vehicle that would do that. I'd also like to outfit this to be a backup plow truck, which it could be. And the addition for that would be for plowing and trailing was $1,800. So a new truck on the Vermont contract site is $30,394. That again includes a 3-year warranty, and it does not include any price for any private sale or trade-in of the current Truck 9. I just think that some of these trucks have seen their better days, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to just keep putting a lot of time and money, particularly Sonny's time and money into these rigs, and we know they're just going to break down again. I guess that's my summary. If anybody has any questions about what's in the fleet, I think I've tried to explain, according to Herb's request, as to what they are used for, and their year and their description. I would hope that you would have a pretty good idea of what the fleet consists of at this point in time based on that summary that I developed. That's what I have to say.
John Langus, question.
Thanks for that, Larry. I appreciate the detail. I'm curious whether there's a good market for used trucks in this sort of market, and not like a beat up used truck, but something that's like 2 years old. So you take the premium off for a new truck, and we have a shortened repurchase schedule. Is that something that's likely to save us money over time by getting something that's got a little bit of dust on it, and we just replace it more often, but we start off with a much lower initial cost?
Well, I would agree that on the initial thought, you would think that was the case, but in my own personal experience and looking at trucks, secondhand trucks, it seems as though I came up with one conclusion, which was if you go 3 to 4 years from the current year, you'd think you're going to see a substantial drop in price, but you don't. I will give you one example that I found on cars.com. It's a 2016 Chevrolet Silverado, which is exactly what I'm proposing to purchase. It's got 63,000 miles on it, and they want $21,000. And I don't know if that's unusual. I think that's kind of typical. That's what I found buying secondhand vehicles, is that if you go 3 or 4 years out, you don't really lose that much in price. But if you drop down where you do drop a lot in price, you're buying somebody else's headaches. Now, is that to say that I would refuse to buy a secondhand pickup if somebody told me to? No, not at all. If that's what you want me to do, fine. I just offered what my research and what my looking for pickups has shown me.
Mary?
Okay.
So if we did go through with approving the purchase of these trucks, would you be trading in the old trucks, or would they be on the lot at DPW, or could they be auctioned? I'm imagining 5 old trucks, beginnings of a junkyard at DPW. So, I mean, do they have, they must be pretty beat up. Maybe they're, auction material or scrap or something like that, some of them.
Well, they are definitely beat up. That is for sure. But to try to get the most bang for the buck, I think I'd try to go through an advertising process just to, put a minimum bid on it or something, on a couple of them anyways, just to see what would happen. But it's up to you as to how you would want to do it. I think if you trade in some of these trucks, they'll give you $500 for them, which is about as much as they'll give you for the amount of steel is in them. But
Right.
you could try just to sell them and see what kind of money you get. Maybe you get a surprise here and there,
I'd be more inclined to clear them out.
Well, that's fine with me. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, Larry's been instructed where possible to reduce his fleet, and he's been successful in that in the outset of him being here. And the idea is not to collect vehicles, to fix them up to a certain level that they can do one little job and then park it until we can find some more repair and maintenance money to do something again. That's
Right, it doesn't make sense.
we're getting away from that
Good.
traditional method. Yep.
Roger?
Well, it sounds like Sonny is a really talented mechanic, so thank you to him. And it's no doubt in my mind that some of these details, when you're looking at 230,000 plus miles, I think even a layman knows that like maybe it's time for replacement, right? I guess I'll pay homage to former board member John Pepper with this question, which is why are all these small rural towns maintaining and buying their own fleets in the first place, right? So which is to say, like, I assume there's no mechanism in the state of Vermont to think of like a larger scale leasing system that, rather than like looking at sort of the used trucks that sort of like have some kind of, you mentioned how they're cross-purpose and they're multi-purpose and how you would fit them out to be more than just their stated purpose. You mentioned like a backup plow truck, for instance. And so I know that like all that retrofitting because you have retrofitting for different purposes, it makes sense to own the vehicles. But, like the expense of maintaining and operating our own fleet as a small town, like strikes me as something that we might need to be exploring. Is that really incredulous, or is it just a chaos Muppet kind of question? So maybe there's a question for Herb.
Great, I get all the hard questions. So, I think that, that is a tough question. I do know that municipalities look at lease options as part of their process. They try to look at, there are some communities that will purchase items such as a grader and try to share it with other particular communities. I think that to a degree, the state offers us in that bulk purchasing situation that they have a lot of a piece of what you're asking. In other words, we get a bulk rate because if we can go through the state purchasing, which has already done the formal bidding, it may not serve the particular, whatever the specific vehicles that they have may not serve a municipality specific purpose. But for the most part, you've got the baseline vehicles that are out there that you can either pick up and modify, or they serve your purpose. But in terms of the pricing, the state is definitely working in the favor of the municipalities for that type of thing. And I think that goes back to Langus's question with a used vehicle, a good used vehicle versus a state contract. If you try, I think Langus's thing really applies if you're going out and buying a new pickup retail versus buying it used, because the average citizen doesn't have the benefit of the joint, the purchasing at the state level, which literally brings the price down considerably. I'm not saying Langus is wrong, but I'm just saying there's a closer margin of difference between a new vehicle and an older one at that point. If there are part of some of the issues with regard to owning our own fleet is that, to use the grader anecdotally, is that the day that Larry is out grading roads is the same day that everybody else needs to be grading roads. It's not, you have to wait for that weather situation. So in some cases, that's why you have municipalities with their own graders Other communities may have to wait for that and then, subject to weather, deal with it. Or there are people that are out there that do this as a living, and you could contract out that service. So that's a piece of, what plays into your question, Roger. I do think that there's a level of expectation of service in this particular community over the years. I'm not saying that can't change, but I think the fleet that we have right now, however old it is, has been adapted to conform to that level of expectation of service. We have tried to reduce the fleet. We've tried to do cross service of different vehicles for different seasons and stuff. So I know I'm kind of dancing around your question, but I'm trying to add a little purpose to that as well.
Yeah, and I guess I think maybe it's it's a broader conversation, and I don't mean to introduce it now, but there's a difference between figuring out what's subject to interlocal agreement, as you've talked about before with the greater example. There's a difference between owning outright and then maintaining a fleet, and then there's an option that clearly may not even exist really in our state, maybe in Chittenden, but certainly not here. This idea of somehow leasing these vehicles, it's just
and bringing in Langus's energy, electric vehicles.
Well, right, exactly. We might want to make further kinds of innovations with our not innovations. That's a tech term, but I think you understand. We might want to do something. We might have other values that we want to attach to these vehicles as well. And I know that technology is not there, which is also another conversation. Yep. But I don't know how much that needs to be explored in the future. Maybe it's a capital budget.
I've mentioned it before. What I am working on, with department heads right now, is for them to be putting together strategic plans for their particular departments, and that fits it. That's sort of that higher level discussion point that then allows them to feed into the budget process, to feed into the capital budget and program, to look at things philosophically, maybe differently, even if it's the same. But the idea is to have those strategic plans and ask themselves those questions. So I do think at least a piece of what you're looking for, we're starting to get into.
Mary? You're muted.
On the pickups, if I heard Larry correctly, there's three-year warranty on each one, and they appeared to hold their value. So if we did want to switch up to hybrid or something like that, it might be that we wouldn't lose a whole lot of money there, as long as they aren't in accidents or anything like that. The other thing about this is when you total the three purchases up, I think you've got over $163,000. And did I hear you say correctly, Herb, that the designated fund is at 189,000 with 20,000 more coming in after July 1st?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's a big whack to the fund. So the other question might be, is there another snowplow that's on its last legs, or is also going to need replacing within the next 3 or 4 years? Because we'd have to build the fund back up to be able to afford something like that once we made this purchase for these three vehicles.
Correct, and Larry
did that
part of his capital budget process.
You have that information as well, Mary, in front of you, I believe. I've submitted that schedule of equipment that I have put in a priority. You have that? They have that, right?
Yes, they do.
And you should see what my plans are for replacement of the vehicles in the upcoming years and the costs associated with them.
Yeah, it's not right in front of me right this second, but yes, I have looked at your capital plan, yes.
Right. Next year, I would propose that we'd replace truck number 4, which is a 2010 dump truck for $192,000. That's a 4-wheel drive dump truck.
Yeah, well, okay. No, sorry. I'm not going to comment.
Well, you can.
What?
These are exactly the discussions that are great to have, not it necessarily, you know, what is the overall fleet outlook for 4 or 5 years out at 9, 10 at night. But Larry has laid that out for you in your last budget process. He basically updated it for tonight. And then as we get into the budget process again, clearly that's what we're looking at. The budget process had generally the proposed revenue sources that go along with that. You as a board would decide as a group based on our recommendation whether you're going to endorse that or not. If not, we can have those particular discussions. I mean, that's sort of that second generation of the capital budget that we've been talking about.
Yeah, John.
So that's what I've been trying to dig back into our old files, and of course, Rob, it's really hard to look for old files because we don't have a good searchable database. So someday we're gonna hog tie you after you're not within your first 6 months, and get us to update that to a searchable database. But so were all 4 of these items in the approved budget process? So are we just talking about stuff that we basically already signed off on in principle, and we're just reaffirming that these really do need to be replaced?
These were definitely part of the discussion during the December timeframe. You know, right? I'm just showing paper. I know you can't see it, but this was what you guys had during that budget process, and the vehicles are right there.
Yeah.
This is not a new discussion.
I mean, I would respectfully like to press back a little bit, Larry, on the couple of year old vehicles. Like, I have personally, more than half of the vehicles I bought in my life, and I'm approaching my 50th birthday, so I bought a fair few vehicles in my life, and that wasn't like a plug to get me cards or anything. But I've found that to be consistently really good value, to get something that's a couple of years old, and you need to make sure you know what you're doing so that you don't, as you said, buy someone else's problem. But it sounds like we have very good people, way better than I am. I just always take it to a mechanic that I trust and have them check it before I buy something that's used. But I think there's frequently some really good value there, and the moment that we find ourselves in, quite frankly, I would bet that we're going to find some vehicles that people maybe weren't looking to have to sell 6 months ago, but are having to because they're in different situations where they need to get some cash. So I'm certainly supportive of replacing. Look, I think you've made a good case that these are things that need to be replaced, and so for me it's a question of how do we replace those in a way that's going to get the best value for the town over the next 10 years, or for some of these, as you've seen, we've made some of these things last 20 years, which is great. It's probably not great for the guy who has to drive it today, but it's great that we've gotten that sort of value out of it, and we should be looking forward to trying to do that again.
I don't disagree with you at all, Linus, and I've had this discussion with Larry to say that we do have to, because you've mentioned this before, and is that we do have to respect the fact that we do need to look at some used vehicles as part of the process, that it's not necessarily new. And I know that Larry and I have tried to look a little bit of research, but having more of an authorization to move forward, I think that sort of gives us the extra urging to allow us to really go out there into the used market and see if there really is something that caters to what we're looking for. Absolutely.
Why would you need an authorization to spend money until we know what we can get for a used truck?
I'm sorry?
These are the high-end authorizations for all for purchases of new trucks.
Yeah, I would say if you did a motion or wanted to amend the motion, basically what we've drafted up is an authorization to go and get 3 new vehicles. If during that process that we can find an adequate substitute in a used version, then that's less money that we're going to spend, but we're still getting probably the vehicle that we're looking for. So the motions would be is an authorization up to a certain amount. And you could, it's not the motion, I'm being fair to you, is that the motion specifically don't say that little caveat like what Langus is mentioning, excuse me, what John is mentioning, but certainly amenable to having that added in there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, personally, I'm happy to just have this be a discussion, and if the other board members agree with me that we'd like you to look at that, that we just all look at each other and agree that we're going to look at that. I don't feel like I need to, tie your hands super tight with the motion. I'm happy with an up to dollar amount motion. You guys have done a good job when we've asked for this in the past of beating the bushes and looking for different stuff. I'm thinking of the hybrid police car in particular. So as long as we all agree that we'd like to have that be something on the table as a possible increase in the value for us, I'm happy that that's just an understanding.
So Larry has his hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Larry.
I just wanted to clarify, or hopefully clarify, or get the board's accord on the fact that I'd like to separate truck 12 from the other two trucks. What John says about the two pickups is certainly very applicable, but I think we should be looking at purchasing a new truck for truck 12, and I'd like to do it the way I proposed, but at least I think we should buy a new truck, not a secondhand truck for the frontline truck for winter maintenance.
Any other select board comments?
I have a question, Claudette. So under the current plan, so John is right that we should reference our documents. So if we were to purchase all these three vehicles outright, and also stick on plan with the dump truck next year, what would that look like? That would require the borrowing of funds. Is that right? If we stick with the plan?
You would be in a borrowing situation. You'd probably have a special article or something along those lines. There are different methods of financing, but yes, that kind of a vehicle you would be financing.
Okay, and then I would just like to point out, because I was curious about this, and the Finance Committee prepared a memo that said very broadly and generally that typically the expenses of vehicles are typically done through designated funds, not necessarily the acquiring of debt, but I recognize that was a broad statement. So that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Anyone else? So I just want to say when we, the capital budget was not something, we did not go and necessarily vote on that we agree with that capital budget. It was presented, I believe, at our very last budget meeting.
It was.
So that's the wish list, I would say, or the list that the department directors felt were the priorities for purchases and the whens. But it was nothing that was ever, like, we did not go, I believe, and say, yes, we wholeheartedly approve this capital plan. It was the first step in a process. So that's all I wanted to say there.
Don't disagree with you at all, Claudette. That's a first generation to get us back into a capital budgeting process.
Right.
But the information that was provided is the equivalent of what goes into a capital budget. I would like to, in the next generation of that, is to have more intense review of it, to try to have the department heads, if it's necessary, to have more information into it, but it's not a half effort on a capital budget. It had what's in it. But it is the first generation. It's everybody getting used to doing it again. And the next effort is obviously, now that they've done it once, it makes it a lot easier to deal with it later on. But I do want to make sure too, to clarify, that's not a wish list that department heads gave. They spent a lot of time going through and providing that. Admittedly, there are some department heads that have never done a capital budget before, and I had to handhold them through the process. And there are some, like Larry, that have done this before.
Yeah, so poor choice of words on my part, but it was still just the first iteration of a capital budget.
Correct.
Linda has her hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Linda.
Oh, I was going to let you finish, Claudette. Do you have more to say?
Nope.
Okay. I think one of the great concerns I have is there is no capital budget. And so all of this is what we need versus how do we get money in the designated funds to pay for what we need. And you're talking about possibly going out to get a loan for that truck 12 to be able to pay it. That's outside of pre-planning, pre-saving, or putting money aside to do that. So that's one concern I have. Another concern is the department director has a pickup truck and drives how many miles back and forth daily? Is it possible to go with, I don't know, a surplus vehicle of a smaller size or a hybrid vehicle, which would save money using it and keep the trucks that are needed for building and grounds or highway at the yard and not driving mileage, highway mileage? I'm not sure how much the mileage is there, but it's one way of saving that mileage. We know this has been coming because of the number of vehicles that had not been replaced, but to do it all in 1 year or doing that truck 12 next year with money that's not there and having to get a note, it just seems to be defeating the purpose of trying to establish a plan that we can do that's affordable.
Thank you for those comments. I don't know about replacing Larry's truck with a car. Is that a possibility? That's a question.
Sorry, there's always stuff that we can deal with. As most of you know, it's a benefit of the Public Works Director to have a vehicle to take home. This particular Public Works Director indeed lives further away than the director, so there is more mileage each year. But when that vehicle is back in the yard, it's not the DPW Director's vehicle. It's the town's vehicle that's used by the Highway Department, Buildings and Grounds throughout the course of the day. So there are multiple uses of that particular vehicle. It's one of the pickups. So I'm not saying a car couldn't be done as a continued benefit for the department, the DPW director, but you would be taking away some of the multi-use of a pickup truck for when it's in the yard for the work purposes. So what happens is you're basically bringing offline a pickup truck for the sake of another vehicle, and I don't know what that car could be used for during the day other than, say, trainings and that sort of stuff. But in terms of a regular use, that's an issue.
I think you're misunderstanding a little bit, Herb. The question, I believe, Linda, I'm rephrasing your question, was can one of these pickup truck purchases be substituted with a car,
right?
So that the truck that Larry is using could be a substitute for one of these truck purchases.
Right.
Am I correct in your question, Linda?
Yeah. Yep. That's what I answered.
I think he answered that.
So I didn't.
So instead of buying the 3 trucks that we have here, we buy 2 trucks and a car. The issue I don't have is the commuting aspect of the director to and from work. It's the utility of that vehicle once it gets to work. It's not just used by the DPW director. Once it comes to work, it gets used by multiple crew members for different projects throughout the course of the day that a car can't do.
Okay, I got you.
See what I'm saying? So I'm not saying no, we have to re-examine the use of particular vehicles. That's the bottom line answer there.
Any further discussion? Is there a select board member willing to make a motion?
Claudette,
Yeah?
for some reason, when I'm raising my hand, nobody's noticing that I'm doing it. I did have one more comment.
I looked down at my phone to see what time it was. Sorry, Linda. Go. Sorry, you do have your hand raised. Sorry.
That's okay.
So
May
go
I
ahead.
speak, Claudette? Okay. You have phrased what I'm looking at, but you're suggesting buying a crew cab to take people to training. Couldn't a car take them to training also? I'm not saying buy a little VW. I mean, you know, the chief, you know, we've got the police chief's got like a sedan type car, a car that people could ride in comfortably without taking a pickup truck to the training for any of the classes Better Back Road does or any of the other classes. But primarily, I just find the use of extra pickups. They could take it and use the car to go where they parked the grader, where they left off on the road for the next day. I mean, I see multiple dual uses, but to take a, what is it, a 250 or 350 pickup and drive back and forth for that mileage does not seem practical to do that with a large truck.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board.
I'll do it.
Go ahead, Mary.
I move to authorize the expenditure of up to $109,000 for the purchase of a 2020 Ford F-550 four-wheel drive truck with plow, wing, live body sander, and sander controls to replace the current truck 12, a 2000 Ford F-550 one-ton four-wheel drive truck with front plow and fiberglass sander.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So motion made by Mary, seconded by John. And Herb, can we amend, or Mary, I should say, can we amend this motion to say 109,000 from the DPW equipment designated fund? I want to know where the money's coming from.
Yes. How do I amend it though? Amend it to say that the 109,000 comes from the DPW designated vehicle fund.
Equipment fund.
Equipment fund, sorry.
Are you okay with that amendment, John?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes on this one. Moving on
The
to
suspense is killing us.
No, it's not. You know what my issue. Next motion. Is anyone willing to make that motion?
I'll do it. Let's see. I move to authorize the expenditure of up to $24,059 for the purchase of a 2020 Vermont state contract Chevrolet Silverado four-wheel drive pickup with regular cab to replace current truck 6, a 2006 Dodge 3500 Ram four-wheel drive pickup.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
So there was the discussion that there would be looking at options and presenting those to the board, or is that not, should we not make this part of that?
Well, that's why it says up to.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
I was trying
it
to
does,
A little bit.
Yeah.
it does specify a year,
Yeah.
which would limit.
Oh,
Can you
that's
say word equivalent in the used format?
Yeah.
okay. So amend a motion to to add or its equivalent in a used format.
With the money coming from the,
With the money coming from the DPW equipment fund.
John, you okay with those amendments?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes on this one as well.
Ours.
Next motion?
I move to authorize the expenditure of up to $30,394 for the purchase of a 2020 Vermont state contract Chevrolet Silverado four-wheel drive pickup with crew cab to replace current truck 9, a 2008 Dodge 2500 Ram four-wheel drive pickup.
With the previous amendments as the earlier one?
Or it's a used equivalent and funding to come from the DPW equipment fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mary, seconded by John. Any further discussion?
So because there is some ambiguity in, because we say or the equivalent, but we're not approving something that's exact, would we expect to see what the results of that search are, or do we just authorize, that discretion? I'm not necessarily saying that I'm one way or the other. I just want to know I just want that clarity.
I would authorize the discretion personally.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with some discretion there. I mean, you're going to have Silverados. If you're looking at used, right, you might have a Silverado competing with an F-150, competing with a Dodge. So I'm comfortable with some flexibility there.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. I'm comfortable too.
Okay, roll call. Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And Claudette's a no.
Oh.
Okay. Moving down to item 13, the memorandum of understanding with the school board related to the Norwich Finance Committee.
Madam Chair, just a broad thank you for the previous actions. I know that the highway crew appreciates what you did tonight.
Okay.
You're quite welcome.
But leasing, right, Herb? We're gonna look into that.
I think Hartford just actually started leasing some equipment, but anyway, MOU. John Langus.
Yes, ma'am.
To you.
So we've talked about this for about a year or so. Tom Canton and I have had several back and forths the direction of both the school board and the select board over that period of time. We got a little distracted for a while there during budget season and town meeting season, but we got back together recently and exchanged the documents that we put in the packet. The idea here, if you recall, is that the Finance Committee used to be charged with both advising the town select board on town budget issues and the school board on school budget issues. The Norwich Finance Committee had basically died out, and that was reported to us to be because of a few things, but people had basically ceased to be willing to do it. So when we revived it, we decided to narrow that charge to just town stuff. We felt like we really needed some outside advice, and we wanted that focus, and we specifically talked at the time about if the folks that were on that committee felt like they were willing to expand their charge to include the school board, we would look at re-expanding that to include that as part of their charge. So, you know, we've had some turnover here in the last few weeks. That was why I asked that specific question of Pam tonight. But I think that it's safe to say that the members of the committee, including Pam, who was very clear about it tonight, are willing to do that, are willing to expand the charge to cover both budgets, and they recognize the amount of work that that represents. One of the big changes that will come out of this is that the committee will be, both bodies will have to consult on who gets appointed to that committee. So we already have a committee. If we expand this again, part of that will have to be that the school board looks at the current committee and has a vote as to whether they're happy with the current makeup of the committee. Hopefully that will be the case, and then they'll just move forward. But then future appointments will need the concurrence of both boards. So we've got a revised charter in the packet. There's one set of comments that I got back from Tom since I put that in the packet, and that has to do with what we talked about this evening with Jeff. So the current charter for the committee, as we talked about earlier, has a categorical disqualification for anyone who either works for the town, this would be expanded to be the town or the school, or is an immediate family member of someone who works for the town or the school. The draft that you have before you amends that to just say, if you're one of those people, you need to call that out when you apply, and that needs to be a specific point of discussion in considering whether to appoint you. The comment that I got from Tom, which I think makes sense, is to draw a line between those two categories. So keep the categorical disqualification for anyone who actually is employed by either the town or the school, but keep some flexibility for someone who may be a family member of such a person. For me, that is a worthwhile distinction to draw because the Finance Committee by design has no decision-making authority. All they are charged to do is give advice. At the moment, they give us advice. With the proposed change, they would also give advice to the school board as to their budget. But they have no decision-making authority in their own right. And you would expect, so in the case of Jeff, if he were to be retained on the Finance Committee, you would expect him to recuse himself from discussions of the rec budget because his wife Bree is our rec director. What really draws me to ask for you all to consider that distinction is that, you know, what I just said about the actual ability to have a conflict. There's not the ability to have an actual conflict of interest because they can't make a decision. But we're a small town, and expertise is not, just, spilling out of our doors of people that are looking to do appointments like this. This is one of the bigger work product appointments that we make. Planning Commission is a lot of work, but this is a lot of work we're asking people to do, and there are a few people that are just really particularly well qualified to do this, and Jeff is, certainly one of those people. And I just hate the idea of losing the opportunity to get advice and service from someone who's eager to do it, drawn on the basis of a perceived issue that, in my view, would not be able to actually have a real conflict. So I throw that out to you as a part of the discussion. And otherwise, just the general question of whether we want to expand this group to start thinking about these sort of things. Thanks.
So before we get into any select board questions or comments, is there anybody that's willing to make a motion on the MOU.
I'd make the motion. I move to approve the memorandum of understanding between the Norwich Select Board and the Norwich School Board regarding the Norwich and Dresden Finance Committees, and to authorize Claudette to sign said MOU on the Select Board's behalf.
Second.
Now I'll open it up for discussion, and I don't want to have to turn off the chat.
I'm not sure why you have to make a rule like that, since we haven't talked about making a rule like that. So it's a function of the
It's not reflected in the minutes. That's my question. That's my concern. And then they should be reflected.
So anyone who uses the chat should be aware that their comments are not being captured.
Well, I mean, we have it gets logged, and so we have the ability to do what we want with it.
Okay.
But I will say, like, there's no reason why this can't be made into a public comment.
Roger, you read some other comments.
No, I'll read it. So there's 5 private equity people on the dirt part of Turnpike alone: professors, doctors, lawyers, bankers, etc. in Norwich, a small town but filled with educated professionals. They're part of a meeting record. Roger is correct, says Doug Wilberdine. I'm happy to put into Roger is correct into the public record.
So we do have a motion and a.
That's right.
Did we have and a second? Motion by Rob, second by John. Mary had her hand up.
I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about the MOU. So the what logic did the approval part come out of, where Hanover approves Norwich and Norwich approves Hanover? I mean, what?
Just the simple fact that they're advising to both of us, so we should both be, have a hand in who gets appointed to it.
Can you think of a circumstance where someone would not be approved? Like approved by one, but not.
I would not want to venture a guess as to who that might be, but yeah, sure, I could imagine.
I don't know. I just think it's
random theoretical person.
I don't know. I just think it's kind of odd. I see the logic of it in one direction, and then I sort of wonder about it in another.
I would expect it to be rare, if ever, an issue. I think the point is that it was in there previously. So in the previous version of the finance committee that used to exist, that was part of the
in there.
thinking.
Okay, thank you.
And so I think it's really just to be not taken for granted. So given the opportunity to say, hey, are you really thinking about the school stuff too? Or are you really just wanting to be on this to talk about, town budget?
And my other question is about the conflict of interest. Is it sort of cleaner to leave it that the person shouldn't work for the school district or the town, but also shouldn't be related to someone who is? Isn't it better to sort of leave it that stringent?
Mary, can we just vote on the motion before we discuss the finance charge change?
No, because that's part of the what we're voting on, isn't it?
If you don't want to discuss it, that's fine. But I have a few questions, but it's late at night, so I'll yield the mic to other people.
So just on the voting point, so the school board is going to meet maybe tomorrow. So my suggestion, despite having seconded the motion, is that we actually, well, I guess we could vote on it subject to their approval. We could also just, give the sense of the board as to what we think about this. Let the school board come back just in case there's a little bit of back and forth. I don't think this has to be decided this meeting, so we could just say how we felt about this, let them have their feedback, and then we both separately vote at the next meeting.
John, do you know if the Marion Cross School Board has any say in, no, they wouldn't. But I was going to say, has any say in the Hanover Finance Committee appointees, but that wouldn't, I don't know. Do they?
Yes, what is it? It says in here in the thing. So they the Norwich Finance Committee with the Hanover Finance Committee become the Dresden Finance Committee. So they talk about the stuff that affects the cross-border stuff.
And do you know if the Hanover Finance Committee charge is how that's written with, I guess, bringing it back to the conflict of interest piece?
I do know. I could certainly investigate that between now and if we wanted to.
It would seem we should be in sync, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's right. My suspicion is that they maybe draw that same line where definitely not an employee, but if you're a spouse of an employee, that's okay, because I doubt Tom would have suggested that if it would have been a conflict, but I don't know that for sure, so I would have to.
Okay. Roger?
So just a question. So I guess and Cheryl also has her hand up, so I want to acknowledge that. But it seems like, so when we appoint people, and this is reference to John's earlier point, when we appoint people to the Norwich Finance Committee, their automatic membership to the Norwich, to sort of this advisory role for the school's budget as well. And that seems to be more of a function of tradition. And I wondered what we still thought of that. I think some of the conflict of interest stuff to that particular applicant could be sort of addressed if we say like, hey, like you have a brilliant background, can you advise in this capacity, and bring it back to the larger group. So I guess my question is like, how do we feel about sort of the do we think it's, I don't want to say antiquated, but do we think there's, classically it's been the two finance committees come together and advise in the school, but what makes us think that makes them qualified to review a school's budget at all, right? So I wondered how we still felt about that. And then the only thing I will say about conflict of interest generally is I do think it is an important point that we live in a small town. And I think call out culture is real and appropriate. So like I expect someone to disclose their own bias. And I think that we have a very strong policy for calling out that potential bias. And I don't think that should get in the way of like expertise in any way. Like I think I have no problem wondering out loud if someone is in conflict and talking about that in a respectable, productive way, right? Like there's, everything is political. And so it's important to acknowledge that rather than trying to avoid it, right? You can't, especially in small rural America. Okay, that is my point.
So Cheryl had her hand up.
Yep.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So my first question is, this is something that's replacing what the select board has done already, or is this an additional?
No, this would replace it. This would update the finance committee charge. So there's the MOU, and then there's the charge, and it would update the charge.
So you're now excluding the treasurer from any position.
That was not intentional. So, is that right?
I'm looking at this quickly for the first time, John, so I'm quickly asking. The other question, did Mary's question have to do with the Hanover Finance Committee approving members of the Norwich Finance Committee?
It was. Yeah.
Is that in here somewhere?
No.
What?
No, the Norwich School Board has the right to approve or disapprove of people that are appointed to this joint finance committee.
But
The
not,
Hanover Finance Committee doesn't have anything to say about it. They
that's
just have to hang out together in meetings,
right. That's what
whether
I
they want to or not.
That's what I thought. So the Hanover Finance Committee has nothing to do with the Norwich Finance Committee, but when we come together, the finance committees, they make and comprise the Dresden Finance Committee, which is what the articles of incorporation between the two have always said. Once there's a Norwich Finance Committee, they and the Hanover Finance Committee comprise the Dresden Finance Committee.
Yes, and my point is that maybe that needs to be thought through, but I won't get into that.
But that's in the articles of incorporation between us. So I think it takes a little bit more effort, but you can certainly look into it.
That's right.
To change something.
Yeah, that's just sort of that part again is part of the history. That's how it was all set up, and this is just that language is just putting it back how it used to be, which isn't to say that it shouldn't be different now, but most of what we're doing here is just sort of putting it back like it used to be. Now that we've had a year of our finance committee getting their legs again and deciding that they're happy to expand their brief to include what is a lot of extra work.
Right.
So in the past, I probably told you all this before, it was a 6-member finance committee and the treasurer was an automatic finance committee member. That's the way it was historically.
That's weird that wouldn't be reflected here, because I definitely didn't chop that out. This is based on the old one rather than the current one. But I mean, you're on the committee now, so you would stay on the committee, but the position is not mentioned here. We could talk about whether we want to add that in as a sentence here in the charge. I mean, aren't you already part of the discussion anyway, because you're the treasurer of the school board as well?
No, I'm the treasurer of Dresden.
Oh.
I'm the treasurer of all 3 school districts, as it turns out right now.
Right. So you're definitely in the mix, regardless of whether you're in it through this, right?
Not as a finance committee.
Not as a finance committee member. I mean, I could go to meetings and
the budget.
Well, you are a member of the finance committee.
Right,
You are, in
that's
fact.
true in Norwich right now, but if you're changing your charge and your
Not as to current members, but yes, true. Your successor would
Right.
not automatically be here by virtue of the title, and maybe we want to change that.
So just in a, John, I would like to support your recommendation that we not decide this tonight and look at it tomorrow. I mean, look at it on June 10th.
Yeah, just table it till June 10th and work on it a little more.
What are we working on?
Yeah, I mean, I would like direction from the board, though, as to what you're happy with and what you. So, I mean, what is the sense of the board on the point that Cheryl's just raised? Do we want to specifically name the title of treasurer as someone who's an automatic member of this advisory committee?
I would say yes. But also, I'd say yes to making a treasurer automatically part of the committee, the Dresden committee.
It could be that it's not on there because of that dual board approval process, but I can check with Tom on that and see if there's a history there that I'm just not sensitive to.
Yeah, and for some reason, the treasurer, I don't know if I've ever heard that the, does Hanover have, Hanover doesn't have like an official, or do they have an official voted in treasurer?
So Hanover would have a Hanover School District treasurer. I have been serving as the Dresden treasurer for about 10, 11 years, 12 years, in addition to being the town treasurer.
Yes, but I'm wondering, does Hanover Town have a town treasurer who is a member of their I guess what I'm looking at is trying to have the two towns be mirror images of themselves and not as much as we can. Based
Well,
on
the Hanover Finance Committee has a school board member on it. It has a select board member on it. I don't know about mirror imaging it because that is always awkward to have a school board member on a finance committee.
Yeah, I don't know. So one question I would want to know is, does the wording of the Hanover Finance Committee, does it match our wording as far as, I don't know.
So
it's
right now I'm
out
kind of
there.
fried.
So
it's out there to be found.
So my feedback to maybe this may or may not wrap it up is actually I am actually fine with this. I think it's it brings back the shared history. It gets something back on. It cements the proper working relationship that we may need, and that there may be in this memorandum of understanding a note to possibly revisit this in a certain period of time, so we know so we can properly evaluate what is and isn't working and then make adjustments, right? So to maybe even get back to that mirror imaging that Claudette's speaking to, that might not necessarily be valuable, right? I think we don't really know. And so I think I am to give John an answer, I am for this MOU. You can put the treasurer's role in there somehow if that helps. But just I would put in something about specifically calling out when you would take the review of this MOU up again, whether it's in a year or 3 years, whatever you think is appropriate. But I would put that in there.
Okay.
So the question, do I withdraw my motion, or do we table or wait for amendments?
It's up to the board.
I like the idea, Roger's idea of reviewing it, but I would do it after a year. But I think it is a good step forward. So I'd support it, but I do like the review idea if that could be put in there somewhere.
So Roger, it sounds like you're in support of the MOU, but you want further discussion on the finance committee charge? Is that what I'm hearing?
I maybe both. I would put in the MOU to revisit the charge in a certain period of time. Does that make sense? I would, and I don't necessarily think a year is maybe not my recommendation considering how long this one took. And so it might be 2 or 3 years, but I think putting in some kind of contractual agreement that you need to review this is, I think, important. So Cheryl also has her hand up. Does that make sense, or did I muddle it?
That makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
Cheryl has her hand
What
up.
time frame would you put on it, Roger?
I think a year is too short, actually.
2 years? 2 years.
Maybe, perhaps.
A biennial review sounds good.
It's probably long enough, right, to get a sense, but it's not too short.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheryl has her hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
One other point about being a mirror image, the moderator for the town of Hanover chooses the finance committee members.
Excuse me?
Wow.
For the guy.
Oh, gosh.
It's a fascist state.
Okay.
We are 2 different states, remember that.
Free or die by the hand of the moderator.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, wait, I work there.
So what does the board want to do?
So it sounds like I will go ahead and make a motion to table this, subject to feedback from the Norwich School Board. I will then come back to you with a possibly revised version for our next meeting.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So that doesn't leave out that doesn't answer the Jeff Swenson discussion, which truthfully, after Wednesday, I heard consensus, yes, notify Jeff, that he's not eligible. And so I sent him an email that night.
I stand by that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
But
I defer to the sense of the board there. You know, if we, depending on where the language of this revised charge is, you know, maybe he comes back and reapplies if we decide to change that. But I'm fine to stand by that if that's everyone's recollection.
Hey, John, just a point where you made a motion to table. Is that you going to take formal action on that, or do you guys just decide consensus?
That sounded like popular acclamation to me. I don't know.
Just making sure, because I heard you actually move. That was all. So.
I did.
So are we done with this discussion? To recap, we're tabling.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Tabling this discussion, and John's going to reach back out, and we'll address it at the June, hopefully the June 10th meeting, if the turnaround can be that quick. But it's not off the we'll revisit for sure. The timing is just the question. I would like to not address the COVID-19 unless there's a specific something that must be addressed. And I see Herb shaking his head no.
I think the chief is doing a great job at keeping us up to date every day on the official changes, so that's great.
So for the June 10th, I'll tell you what I have heard that we need to add the personnel issue executive session, whether or not if Rob and Herb can get together for the SimQuest thing. By then we should have the town plan work, or what the board needs to address, at least look at it and then decide how we're going to divvy it out. Not or plot if we have a specific timeline we need to follow. I also think we need to have at least we have to start thinking about our August 11th election. And we're gonna, I don't know, I haven't heard from Bonnie. We did get, I don't know how she's planning on holding that election, whether it's going to be all absentee ballot, all mail-in, drive-up voting, but I think we should start to have some discussion. Does anybody disagree with that?
I don't disagree with it, but I think even the governor and the Secretary of State are kind of going back and forth about this issue as well. But I would like to hear Bonnie's, take on things.
Yeah.
Is it more about, so Claudette, would that more a function of like what we may or may not want to add to the ballot or recommend be added to the ballot? Or is it more of a function of just like,
we're going to hold it?
Probably both. We had talked about adding some appropriation language. John had considered that. The lister position will be open then, but mostly I want to kind of get some kind of sense from Bonnie about what she's thinking and planning.
So, like the budget discussion, I'm perfectly in support of focused discussions on discrete issues. I'm not supportive of just a general chat about what we think might happen with elections in Vermont, given COVID. So if it's nothing that's within our purview or nothing that we have anything to add to the discussion other than our own, sort of thoughts and opinions, I would rather not have that discussion. But if there are specific things that Bonnie wants to update us on, I would fully support that.
Did you want to consider adding a article for an appropriation? And is it too early?
I mean, I think that that's a question for Herb. If he would like to have as part of that conversation, a short discussion of whether he thinks that that's going to be necessary. But my guess is that based on the budget now that we've seen today, we're pretty well on track for where we budgeted. So, you know,
Okay.
at that point, we're probably voting on the new budget, but, you know, it's close enough, but I'd leave that to her personally.
The only thing I'm thinking of right now, I'm kind of comfortable with the budget and stuff, but the number of days that you have to the ballots or whatever have to be available, something like 45 or 47 days in advance of August 11 because of the primary requirements. So that comes back really quickly into June. I can't count fast enough on my calendar, but you might be able to make that decision on the 10th, but you probably have to sign a warning that night too. The only other thing is you will have to have a public, I'm switching to Tracy Hall renovation. You will have to have a public informational meeting the night before the vote on August 10th. So if you haven't put that in your calendar yet, you need to put that in there.
Okay. So we may need, depending on the math, have an agenda item about the warning of the meeting. And I mean the articles, right? Have all of those written
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, so if you're going to do anything different than what Bonnie's already planning on, yeah, I'll get with Bonnie tomorrow because I'm going to give her an update that she may have to keep the next meeting open for her to attend, but I can chat with her about what she's already got expected or not. But if you're going to do any kind of budget stuff, any other separate articles than that's already being planned, yeah, subject to deadline, my guess is June 10 is when you're going to have to ultimately decide. You know, unless you have to hold a special meeting.
Okay.
I had a couple other things, Madam Chair, that
Yep.
the Great River Hydro, there might be a status because the mediation is June 2nd, so there may be some update there. And that would be an executive session item probably. And then I would encourage, I can't remember who asked it today, but I know Madam Chair, you've been looking at the fees that we talked about last July to start with, but it might be good to just have the solid waste fees on there since the July 1 is the new sticker time frame. So so maybe not the fees as a whole, but the solid waste fees.
Okay.
I think, Claudette, I don't know, you know, I don't know what this would look like as an agenda item because I do really appreciate what John Langus is saying about keeping a focus on something that's wide ranging, but I do wonder about like how we can ground ourselves more in like the realm of policy. Like, you know, I hear talk of the stickers and I'm remembering that we really wanted to do some kind of plastics collection. And like, I'm not suggesting that we implement that now, particularly because of COVID and it's a high contact sport, but like, you know, is there sort of further board directive or research that needs to be done? Similarly, if there's any other policy type thinking that we want to accomplish in the next year, you know, COVID or not, we might want to talk about that. I know like the Green Fleet, for example, was on there.
Well, we've all got our list of policies that we're supposed to be working on, and I think there was a July deadline on those.
Okay. So maybe we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I hear you with the transfer station stuff, Herb. Was there something else? Would we have the,
You got ones that I wanted to talk about.
do you think we'll have a response to the RFP for 132?
Actually, it won't be ripe for the Browns Schoolhouse Bridge yet because I'll be working with a committee to get a recommendation to you, but that would be your secondary June meeting. The RFP for 132, I can at least give you an update for that. I got to work with Larry in preparing an RFP and getting it out the door.
Okay. So hopefully, I'm going to hold it there, and something always comes up, but it would be nice if we could end a meeting before 10:30 or 10 p.m. So, so anyway, if anybody else has any agenda items they want to propose, send them on. Now I would entertain a motion to adjourn unless there's something that other people want to discuss.
I move to adjourn.
Is there, Roger, was that a second?
I'll second Mary's motion.
Roll call, Mary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
You.
Have a good night.
Good night.